anyone watching to our work session. There's no public comment at work sessions. We can give staff directions, but probably not motions, but we could. And we're live and taped. And thank you.
We ready?
Yes, we're
Yes.
ready.
Yes, good morning, everybody.
Morning, Chris.
Yes, so we're here today to talk about cluster development, and I just have a couple things wanted to go over, and then I'm going to be turning things over to Daphne to run through a presentation. So cluster development is not a new concept. For thousands of years, humanity has been clustering development for protection from the wilds of where they live, to protection from invaders and so on, but also to preserve agricultural land. So the idea of a farming village and so on, clustering dwellings together to allow for the extra space around them. So it's really a concept that's been around for quite a while. Today, clustering is less about protecting from the wilds and more about looking at providing some flexibility to developers to allow for things like common sense building. You don't want to, if you can build two homes on a property, you don't want to build one of them in a swamp. You want to put the two homes where it makes sense so you can build them and leave that swamp for alone, right? It also allows for reducing costs, protecting the environment, and encouraging some community amenities. So that's more how it's transitioned over the years. So today we're going to walk through talking about clustering in general, and some key terms so that we're all using the same terminology, and talking about from a theoretical perspective some of the benefits and some of the drawbacks to clustering. And then we'll get into clustering related to Carroll County. So we'll talk about references to our planning documents, such as our master plan, a bit about the history of the code here in the county. And then finally, the rules that developers have to follow are outlined in our codes. And so we'll walk through an example project and show how the codes apply to that example project, so to kind of illustrate that. And then we also have some other examples that we can go over if it helps for the discussion. But the last point I want to make is just that none of what we're talking about today is set in stone. So the planning documents, the codes, policies, all of that is very changeable. And actually the master plan, the process that we're working through now, is looking at how do we want to, if we need to, adjust the vision of the county, and then the codes that are then derived from the master plan documents. So cluster developments have been in place in our zoning code since 1965, and they've evolved a little bit since then. But we are here to assist in any sort of changes from a planning direction to a code direction and so on, or policy that you all are interested in making. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daphne to walk through the presentation, then we'll have a discussion.
Thanks, Chris. So we'll start off with just kind of a basic understanding of what a cluster subdivision is. The graphics that are here on this slide, I think, are a nice illustration of what the difference between maybe a conventional subdivision might look like and what a cluster development might look like. We have a couple of definitions that are provided on the slide. One is taken from an outside source that talks about residential cluster development being a form of land development that allows you to group buildings together to save the remaining land for various things: common open space, conservation, agriculture, recreation, public or semi-public uses. This general definition also shows up in our Freedom Community Comprehensive Plan. Not verbatim, but some of the same ideas, that cluster development is a way that you can allow development to occur so that buildings are grouped together and different types of resources are protected or preserved in the process. The Freedom Plan also specifically calls out that a reduction in permitted lot size may be the result of this type of development. Which brings me to our key important definitions here. So as we're going through this presentation, a few things to just keep in mind. There's lot yield and then there's lot size. And lot yield is the potential number of lots that can be created from a parcel. This is going to be highly variable depending on the actual lot size, but also the history of the parcels that are involved. If you have a multi-parcel deed or a parcel that's taken off conveyances, that kind of thing is going to affect your lot yield, as is the zoning. Two examples that we've given here are in the agricultural zone, your yield is generally one lot for every 20 acres. Again, that depends on the specific parcel. But we also have a maximum of 7 lots that can be created in the ag zone because of the septic tiers. This is different, of course, from the lot size. So in the ag zone, you can develop at a yield of 1 per 20 acres, but that doesn't mean that every lot is going to be 20 acres in size. Which gets us to lot size. The minimum lot size is set by our zoning ordinance. So in our R40,000 zoning district, which does have a lot yield of 1 lot for every 40,000 square feet, the minimum lot size is also 40,000 square feet. And just so everybody's aware, 1 acre is 43,560 square feet, so that 40,000 square foot minimum lot size is just a little bit smaller than 1 acre. A couple of other definitions that we want to put out here for our, as we go into the presentation. There's open space and there's active open space. The important thing when we look at open space, and you can see on this slide the definition that comes from our code, is that open space is not always open, unforested, uninterrupted land. It can include forested land, it can include wetlands, it can include lots of different things. So our definition specifically talks about it as a parcel of land or waters that's set aside, is dedicated, designated, or reserved for public or private use or enjoyment. Active open space is a little different. This is land that is set aside for active use. It could include things like playing fields, it could be greenways for pedestrian use. It's designed for community access and maintained for the benefit of the public. So you can have 2 different types of open space and lots of different things that can exist on that open space. One more important distinction that we want to make as we go into this discussion. We have cluster forms of development which can be different from an actual technical cluster subdivision. And one place where you find this is in our retirement villages. So these are site development models that allow for age-restricted units to be constructed in a cluster pattern, but this is not necessarily a cluster subdivision. So a few points on the slide that call out some of the distinctions. In a retirement village, this is a site development model that allows for a variety of residential dwelling types. While the dwellings are typically owned by individuals, the land that they sit on is usually maintained by a private entity. It might be like a condominium type of model. The infrastructure, the roads and utilities are typically privately owned and maintained. And at least under our code, there may be an increase in density that's allowable. A cluster development, on the other hand, is a subdivision model. It allows for a reduction in lot size. It allows for the consolidation of infrastructure. The homes are situated on individual lots that are owned by individuals, and the common areas are usually owned by either a homeowners association or the county. The infrastructure, the roads and the utilities, typically are publicly owned and maintained. And there is no increase in density that's allowed as a part of the cluster subdivision model.
So can the retirement village have an increase in density?
Yes.
Yes, yeah,
So it can, but a cluster development cannot?
that's right.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha.
So the distinction here is just that a cluster subdivision or a cluster development is a specific thing that's allowed in our code. It differs from the form or the pattern of buildings being grouped together that could occur as part of a retirement village.
And if I may, I understand that there is an interest in discussing retirement villages. That's a separate section of code, and we're tentatively discussing coming back for a separate work session to talk about retirement villages specifically.
Okay, very briefly, again, staying sort of high level here, and then in the next couple slides, we'll get into specifically what the county says about clustering, but a few of the reasons why clustering has been around for, well, since the 60s when we created our subdivision codes. Number one, it is an efficient and cost-effective way of doing site design. So it focuses the buildings and infrastructure on the most buildable portions of a parcel. And this helps to reduce the public infrastructure like streets and utilities, water lines, sewer lines, that sort of thing. The installation costs or savings are passed on to the home buyers, and the operation and maintenance costs or savings are passed on to the county. In a lot of ways, clustering also helps to address community character issues, so it can enhance the sense of community when common areas are created. This can lead to improved aesthetics, it can lead to improved public amenities, and it can help to maintain rural character by leaving larger portions of undeveloped land, especially out in the ag zones. It also has some environmental benefits. So it preserves the natural drainage systems and vegetation to reduce stormwater runoff and soil erosion. And it reduces stormwater management requirements by reducing the amount of impervious area and maintaining the natural land cover rather than curtilage areas that are often lawn. As with everything, there may also be some drawbacks to clustering as well, and we've highlighted a few of those there. These include the perception of smaller lots being of less value. Also a perception of denser development. So even though we pointed out that the number of lots that can be created is not any different between a traditional subdivision and a cluster subdivision, because they're on smaller lots and clustered together, that could create a perception of denser development. And then the third thing is the maintenance of the open space. When you create open space, somebody's got to maintain it, whether that's the county or the homeowners association, and so that creates an additional wrinkle on things. The next two slides, I'm not going to read verbatim, it's a lot of words, but we did want to pull out the specific ways that both the county master plan and then in particular the Freedom Community Comprehensive Plan address clustering. So in the master plan, one of the things that we are required to address are the state's, well, at the time our master plan was written, it was 12 visions, now it's 8 planning principles. But that reflects cluster development being encouraged to help protect sensitive environmental features. We have some other references to cluster development. One of them relates to our participation in the Reservoir Technical Group and the Reservoir Watershed Protection Program, which talks about trying to protect water quality through a variety of means, one of which is cluster development that will help preserve those open lands and resource areas. We also have a land use and growth management goal that includes facilitating a development pattern that remains consistent with the fabric of the community and is in harmony with the surrounding built and natural environment, and clustering would fall into that category. And then also specific reference to development in the ag zoning district and the idea that we want to encourage cluster types of development in that area so that most of the land that is remaining after that development occurs can be used for productive ag use. In the Freedom Comp Plan, there are several references to cluster development. You can see them on the slide here. It's noted as a way to protect environmental features in residential zoning districts and promote affordability and maximize the efficient use of available lands. It also looks at ways to provide for flexible and creative site design. And then as well, there's a recommendation that residential infill, clustering, and redevelopment may be approved to the extent it's consistent with the fabric of existing communities and does not overburden available public facilities. Okay, so in terms of our cluster subdivision provisions, as I think Chris mentioned, these have been in place since our subdivision regulations have existed. You can see here a nice archival snapshot of our section of the code that addressed the fact that the Planning Commission could allow for lots to be smaller than otherwise required, and provided that the number of lots and dwelling units don't exceed what would normally be permitted, and that the remaining land is designated for open space or recreational areas. Since then, we've had 68 cluster subdivisions constructed in the county, resulting in 1,775 acres of open space as a result. These are just a few things that highlight what has changed over the past 60 years with respect to cluster development. It's obviously been something that has not just been set in stone. It's been modified in response to what we've been seeing in the development community, what we have placed as values on our in our development regulations. A lot of these have related to how the open space is handled. So I'll just highlight a few things. In 1989, the open space criteria were established, and around that time and over some subsequent revisions, the open space and setback requirements and minimum lot size for cluster developments in the conservation district were refined. In 2009, there was a revision that allowed the Planning Commission to require percolation tests to validate conventional buildable lots. This was later addressed, I think, in 2014 with the requirement that in the residential districts, cluster subdivisions had to be on public water and sewer. Prior to that, I think there was a question of whether you were actually able to construct the number of lots that you were showing in your cluster subdivision plan. In 2014, they also added a provision that the Planning Commission could modify the open space requirements for cluster subdivisions on parcels that were less than 10 acres. In 2022, we created the current provisions related to cluster subdivisions that allow the yield to be determined by gross acreage, rather than what prior to that was the process of providing both a conventional plan and a cluster plan, so that we could kind of verify that those lots that were being showed on the cluster plan were actually possible to construct. So now your yield is determined based on the gross acreage rather than having to show that conventional plan. And we'll get into why that might have changed a little bit later in the presentation. Minimum lot sizes were also added in the residential and heritage districts. All right, before we walk you through an example, I want to just pause and see if anybody has any questions about anything that I've shared so far.
You're going to get into lot sizes and, yeah, I don't want to ask stuff that you're going to cover.
Sure.
so
Yeah,
if
we'll
you
walk through
don't
the code
mind.
now, yes.
I have a couple questions, but I'd rather wait to see how you walk us through this before I ask,
Sure.
again, in case the questions get answered. But thank you.
Fair enough. Okay, so we're going to walk through one example of a cluster subdivision. This is Mineral Hill. It is in the Freedom District. And this is a 9.2 acre parcel zoned R20,000. So if we calculated out the, if we calculated out the square footage of the total site, that's 9.2 acres times 43,560, that's 400,752 square feet. Divide that by the 20,000 square feet, which is the minimum lot size, and you have a lot yield of 20 lots. So that's just establishing the maximum number of lots that could be created on this particular parcel. Here you have the conventional plan that was shared for this subdivision that shows what the lot layout would actually be in a conventional design. And you can see that it's, even though calculation-wise they were allowed 20 lots, they've only laid out 15 here. And you can see the average lot size, or not the average lot size, the lot sizes, most of them are around 20,000 square feet. A couple of them are a little bit bigger than that. This slide is the cluster plan that was submitted.
It's
a little hard to read.
It's like what's cut off in the,
Yeah,
do you
so,
wanna switch out of presentation mode and then for this one slide?
Looks a little clustered.
Yeah.
you do have it
printouts.
there,
Are you
yeah.
okay? Okay.
Yeah, okay. So what
Okay.
happens here is in the cluster plan, they lay out the lots, and you see in the table there what the required lot size is, what the lot area per lot that's provided is, and what the difference is. And the difference is what they're then required to provide in open space. So in this table, you see that the reduction in lot area amounts to a total open space requirement of 53,101 square feet. And then you can see the open space that they provided. So between the stormwater management areas, which do count as open space under our code, and other designated open space areas, they've provided 131,990 square feet of open space. So they've exceeded the open space requirement by more than double.
And we have copies of these plans full-size that, if you wanted to look at them in more detail.
Okay. Now we'll walk you through the specific parts of the code to see how this Mineral Hill subdivision addressed it.
Can I just one question? A 14-lot subdivision like this, would they have a homeowners association?
Yes.
They still would. There's no minimum number of lots for that. It's,
Not that I'm aware of, but I did reach out to the developer of this, and there will be an HOA established. And I have the draft covenants. This is still being developed. It's under construction right now, so they haven't sold the
Yeah,
lots and so
yeah,
on. But
yeah.
I do have the draft covenants for this one.
and when there's an HOA, the stormwater management is theirs or counties, or that depends on other stuff?
So here in Carroll County, residential subdivision, the county takes over ownership of the stormwater management facilities. The reasons for that, and this goes back decades and decades and through a lot of experience with these, you can imagine that if a subdivision has a couple of large stormwater facilities, right? And when you first move in, everything's great. 10 years later, or at some point, there's an issue, and all of a sudden that HOA is faced with a $500,000 or $1 million expense to address that. It becomes very difficult then for the county to enforce on an HOA that, hey, you may not have realized it, but you own this and you have to have this expense. And then we get a lot of the questions back to the county, well, can't you take over ownership? Can't you do this for us? And so on. So to short circuit that, many, many years ago, the decision was made that we were not going to rely on HOAs to maintain these and that they would be transferred to the county. The benefit of that has been huge because with the NPDES program, where we have to do restoration projects, a lot of our neighbors have struggled with the cost and so on of trying to gain ownership of these facilities to then retrofit them, so on. In our case, we already owned them, so that greatly simplified the cost associated with the retrofit program. So that was a nice side benefit of that policy that recognized the difficulties of HOAs being saddled with these large facilities and this type of infrastructure.
And then HOAs in Carroll County, I'm not as familiar as other counties. This is 14 lots. In Frederick County, for instance, the developer would still be controlling the HOA based on the number of lots. If only 6 lots were sold, the developer owned more than the total, they controlled the HOA. Is that true here too, or?
I am not familiar with the HOA
Okay.
provisions work.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
We can certainly look into that. Yeah, we can look into it, but
Yeah,
I'm not familiar
it just,
off the top of my head.
decisions on open space and stuff like that, it's, the developer wants to sell houses, so they want to do
Right.
what's right, but once the homeowners take over control, sometimes, like we had one, we proposed a pool, and as soon as the majority owned it, they go, we don't want a pool, we don't want to maintain it, we don't want to insure it, can you just give us a soccer field? And
Yes.
and of course we did.
Yeah.
But it's a little different who's controlling the HOA.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So in this case, the open space that the HOA is responsible for is all environmental. It's on the, but in any case, there's not active open space that they have to maintain. In the covenants, it's proposing an initial yearly cost of $250 per year for the HOA fees. I don't know what benefits
Yeah.
they get from those fees, but that's what they're currently setting at, because there's not going to be active maintenance in that environmental area.
Any other questions?
I just have a couple. On the conventional versus the clustered, why did they stop making to do it both ways? I mean, why, it used to be,
Yes.
you laid it out both ways, and then they looked and said, what benefits the
Yeah.
community best?
Yeah, so what we discovered through looking at dozens of these plans that have been done over the years is that when it came down to the layout of the cluster plan versus the conventional plan, there was no benefit of doing the conventional plan. It was an expense that it was never needed. So as we established, previously, the conventional plan basically established how many lots could be reasonably developed, and then they couldn't have develop any more than that. When they then laid out the cluster plan, they weren't even reaching that same level that they had identified in the conventional plan. So the discussions were with the development community and so on. The cost of hiring an engineer to develop two plans for you, it really wasn't needed, and so we eliminated that provision. So now the way the code works is that you do your gross area, like we just identified, and Daphne's going to talk through it in a minute. For this example, in theory, they could have 20 lots. They did the conventional plan and they figured out, well, we could do 15 lots. They did the cluster plan, they decided 14 lots. So doing that conventional plan to establish the 15 lots, there really was not a need for that expense. And to help streamline the process and keep costs down and so on, the decision was made that we really don't need to go through that conventional plan process.
And that's for this. And you do, this does have a lot of history. It does go back, and I'm not against the concept. And I'm just going to talk about a couple things you've mentioned. If you look at the original Freedom 1977 plan, clustering was in there. It was done well for many, many years. And then all of a sudden it sort of started changing, and now it's gotten even more changed. And what I always go, we spend a lot of time on these master plans, and the community spends a lot of time on these master plans. Hundreds of people, thousands of hours, many meetings. And I've been involved with all of them except the first one in 1977, because I think I was graduating from high school or something. But anyway, but then the subsequent one, 2001, and then that was 17 years later. And the stuff that goes in the plan and the vision and what is here and what it talks about under the housing element doesn't necessarily match what we're coming up with. So right now, again, we had a lot of clusters developments that were nice. And they left the open space, they put walkways in. But what seems to have changed, the number one thing, is the gross versus the net. Because it used to be, they used to do it on the net, what was left. So let's say you have a piece of property like this one. This property is very, very steep slopes. You can see all those little lines. I know, I'm going to count, I'm not a land person, but I know that all those little lines mean there's steep slopes.
Yes.
So if you're conventional, you can't build on the steep slopes. If you have a stream bed, you have to leave a 50-foot buffer. So you have a stream bed, so you have that area. So when you buy a piece of property, that's 100 acres, and there's 20 acres that are on steep slopes, I'm talking, you can't really build on them, and you got 20 acres that are in a stream bed. It used to be they deducted that, and I looked it up, I just Googled it for Maryland clustering, and it pretty much says in Maryland, we basically use net. I mean, if I looked at Frederick County, they use net, and it's a huge difference in the yield depending on the type of property it is. So when you buy a property and it's got steep slopes and it's got a stream, you're buying it with that value of the stream and the steep slopes. I call it undevelopable property. In the old days, that would have been part of your lot. You would have had lots. I live in a 13-lot community, one lot, they're 1 acre each. We have some environmental stuff in ours, but it is left natural to us. We have no homeowner fees. Been there 30-some years. It looks nice. You don't have to do a lot to maintain it. No homeowner fees, really not a lot to the county. And people have more space. If you clustered that same thing, well, it depends on if you're wooded or not, but you would take away, the old way you did it, you took away the steep slopes, you took away the stream beds, and then you had your net developable acres. And there's a nice piece, online, and it basically talks about, identifying and subtracting the unbuildable areas. And the big issue is buildable versus non-buildable. And so now we're letting people take the non-buildable area into the gross acreage versus the net. I started seeing this a number of years ago with a number of projects, and it bothered me because the projects weren't attractive. They have very small yards, and people say, oh, they want small yards. Well, I think I'm not talking about in the ag area. Ag area, I get this. I'm talking about in the R20, in the R40. You basically can cluster down to the next level under it. And basically that's being done now on every single project. So you have an R20, which means half-acre lots. You can go down to R10. If you have R40, you go down to R20. And basically, they're using it, every single lot is going to the minimum. You're going to the next level under. And the space that's open, and if you read back through the master plans, and I've been through all of them, it never talks about using the stream beds, it never talks about the steep slopes. It's all net. I looked at Frederick County's, theirs is it's net. The average dwelling unit in a residential cluster shall be no greater than the permitted density for the district in which the units are located. For the purposes of this division, density means the maximum number of dwelling units which could be built on the net developable land area in the zoning district. Net developable land is that land remaining after flooding soils, areas, and rights-of-way for principal highways and roads have been deducted from the gross site. As you mentioned, not only are we using the steep slopes now, we're using the stream beds, we're also using the stormwater management ponds. So if you go into these communities, and we've noticed they're not attractive, they're not nice, they're not a benefit to the community. When I read back through all the freedom plans, even in the first one in 1977 when they did the clustering, and I can't find my 77 plan, that's why I asked you. I had it, I got it somewhere. It clearly says what they considered the open space to be, and it was recreational areas. It was for the use of the community. A steep slope and a stream bed is not for the use of the community. A stormwater management pond, I would say, is not for the use of the community. Now, it could be. A lot of counties that are letting the density occur, they're making the stormwater management, they're still making it have open space, but the stormwater management has to go underground. It's more expensive,
Yeah,
but at least.
I know of no county that's making anyone do that. That's an option, costs about 4 times as much.
Okay, I'm
But
not sure about.
no counties
And
require.
what they're, excuse me, I have the floor.
No.
I appreciate-
I know you have the floor, but when you state something that's not factually correct,
Okay, well, let me
I feel it
clarify.
needs to be corrected.
I'll clarify for you. So what they're requiring is, excuse
I've
me,
worked
let
in
me finish.
20 of the
I know you're an
counties in
expert on
Carroll
this, but if
County.
you'd listen to me,
Yeah,
I'll explain. Okay.
I am, and the steep slopes, I'll comment on that now too. My lot was a steep slope. Half of it became 4%, so the kids could play there. So the steep slopes in this subdivision with a traditional plan were buildable.
How big is your property?
An acre and a third.
Acre and a third. We're talking about half-acre lots here.
I-
So-
I'm talking about the open space, which is more than
This
an
is not a
acre.
debate. Let me just finish my comments.
Yeah, go
So,
ahead. But
it's-
I just think you should be factually correct. I'm sorry.
Well, if you listen to my argument, maybe you would understand it. So,
I'll
going,
understand, but I also understand the facts. Your argument doesn't change facts.
excuse me, thank you for your commentary and for interrupting me. So, the requirement of the underground storage, it's not the requirement of the underground storage, it's the requirement of the open space. So if they want to be able to cluster and have the open space that is required, they have to go underground, because they have to meet the requirement of the open space. So by default, in having the net acreage, it makes them have, to, if they want to cluster to down where they want to, you have to find another way. If you can't count stormwater management in your open space, by default, you have to use underground. So it might not say you must use underground, but because of the requirement taking out stormwater management as open space, you'd have to go underground to do it. And that's what they're doing in the very nice developments all around Frederick. You look around and say, how come they don't have stormwater management ponds? Well, you ask them, because we went underground. And they had to do it because they couldn't count that. It had to be net developable space versus gross developable space. That's the difference. So is it required? That's what it forces you to do. Or you have to build less lots to get the required open space. So maybe that clarifies what I'm saying. By default, that's what you end up having to
Within
do.
the last week, a civil engineer and 2 developers in Frederick County have told me that's not true.
But they have to still have the open space. But you understand my point.
Yes.
So
So-
if you change from gross to net, it by default either makes you have more, less yield, less lots. Most people want more lots. So for the extra expense of doing that, they're willing to go underground, and they put their stormwater management underground, and then you still have your open space. So it is a trade-off, and it's a
Yeah.
trade-off of what is the expectation of the community. We're talking about communities that are going to be here for a long time. I would say people move, and it says, all this stuff is in the plan, and it talks about what people want in Carroll County, if people read the plan. I'm gonna go back to the net developable acres. So if you go look online, it explains. Acreage, gross acreage is reduced by certain areas that are not suitable for development due to environmental sensitivity or infrastructure requirements. For this example, assume the following unbuildable area exists. Acreage within the 100-year floodplain, let's say it's 8 acres. Let's say you have 3 acres of wetland. Right away for the county roads, take the roads out. Find the net developable land, subtract these areas from the gross acreage. So you take it all around. So you start with your 50, you take all that out, you end up with 37 acres. So you say, okay, I've got 30 acres. Then you take step 3, determine the maximum number of dwelling units calculated based on the net developable land rather than the original gross acreage. And you come up then with 18.5 and you round it, they said round it to the next nearest, down to the next whole number, maximum 18 dwelling units. So you've gone from what was on the gross all the way down to what's on the net. It's a difference.
Yeah.
And that's what has changed, the gross versus the net and what we're counting. And with all the stormwater management and some of the project that I'm looking at, and we talked, you brought up a good point about the homeowner association. So now we've got a development that was clustered, it was laid out both ways a number of years ago. And it seemed like at the time, the planning commission was encouraging it. And they have the option to do it, but it seems like every project is being clustered now. Except for the over 55, but everything is being clustered and we're using gross acreage. And there's really no benefit to the community, except now they have to maintain it. They have to maintain these properties that are not, they're not what we would envision. And if you read in the master plan, the housing unit, it explains what open space is envisioned by people. Active space to do things. Most of these have no active space, zero. Some of them have like green grass. If you look at Wilson Farms, it's a lot. It looks nice on paper. It's all green farm. I mean, it's not really flat to play ball. And you look at you say, look at that piece of property. Those would be half-acre lots. Well, when they were built, I went in and looked. They're all quarter-acre lots. So they're actually clustering down to the next level, and there are 10,000. So it's not at face value. And if you read in our zoning code under R 20,000, it says half-acre lot is 20,000. It doesn't say it can be, it says it is. And in R 40,000, that's what it says in the code. But then you go down and it says, oh, but there's all these exceptions. And again, the exceptions are okay, but it's gotten away from the purpose of it, which is, again, a lot of our communities had these. I've lived in one that was very nicely done. It had open space, it had playground, and the community association paid for that. But now these community associations are being formed or have to be formed, and I don't know what their fees are, but it's just space that has to be mowed, and you got maybe 30 houses, 40 houses, that now have to have an association. They got to pay to have something mowed that is not even usable.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a cost to that. Plus, some of these small groups, let's say you can't get people to pay. It becomes an administrative problem. And then the state of Maryland has done something that I disagree with, but they're requiring the counties now for all these homeowners that you have to do reserve studies on anything. Let's say you have even a sign outside. Now, they've changed it some because we argued about it. And for a big condo association, you might need to do reserve studies. But for all HOA now, they're looking at these reserve studies. Well, you now have another cost of that. You have to now pay taxes on that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you have to do a income tax return for your homeowner association for 20 houses. Mm-hmm. Would I rather have this and have my lot be the true half acre? Half acre is not that big, especially for these houses that are pretty large. Or would I rather have my quarter acre with my little white fence around it that's not attractive and all this space that we now have to mow and pay for? And the question becomes, of course people buy them, but is that truly what was envisioned here in Carroll County? In our county, most of our former developments are about half acre, maybe an acre. They're not, I'm not talking about large parcels. We're talking about, it's the same amount of space, but it's how it's laid out and what the yield is and what is counted as open space. So in a simple term, this clustering idea was a good one for a long time. We have lots of nice developments because of it. A lot of them don't have homeowner fees. I'm not sure how they got around that. But when you look at the whole picture, I don't think the benefit to it is to the community that's being built. I don't think the benefit is necessarily, I mean, I look at one I drive by all the time. It's a slope like this. They now have to get it mowed. The homeowner association, it's no use to them. It should have never been included in that being open space. So I think the biggest thing I have that has changed is the gross versus the net. Again, I go back to, we talk about this planning process ad nauseum. We're getting ready to start for 2035, which is 10 years from now. We go through all this trouble, we have all these meetings, we talk to people about stuff, and then we put together a plan, and there's nothing in here that talks about reducing lot sizes to half for open space that is steep slopes, unbuilt. When you buy a property, when somebody purchases a property, you know what's on it. You know what the yield should be. But in Carroll County, we can get yield out of unbuildable space. And so I don't think encouraging that, it doesn't really benefit. You say you don't have as much pavement to put in, and that what's the group that you said, the Chesapeake Bay, Liberty Reservoir Agreement. Okay, I don't know how much pavement you're actually saving. I don't see the benefit, and again, if you read back to the master plan. There's so much stuff in here that is really good if we would follow it, but the interpretations and then the changing of that word gross to, I mean, net to gross, I don't know if it ever said net, but that's how it was interpreted, has changed it's changed what these communities look like and not necessarily about.
So if I could, yeah, if I could, yeah, so thank you. So the question of how to derive the yield is something that's been around and discussed and changed over the years. As Daphne mentioned, at one point, the code was changed to require percolation tests to prove that those conventional lots could perk, to prove that they actually could be constructed. So in that case, the purpose of the conventional lot is exactly what you were talking about, right? Is that you lay out the lot, you take it into consideration the public right-of-ways, dedications, stormwater management, environmental features, steep slopes, all of that, and then how many lots are left, right? And at one point, back a decade or so ago, it was added in that, well, are we even that sure that those lots are real? And so let's make the developer perk those conventional lots to make sure that they could even be built on, right? So that concept has been around for quite a while. What we've seen through experience with these projects is that when you actually lay out the lots, and we have a good example that we can show you the plans on the Hobie Wolf property. They did a conventional plan, and you take out all of the environmental features and so on. That original parcel, I believe, is around 65 or 70 acres. So from a gross perspective in R20, you're talking 130, 140 lots, right? When they laid out the conventional plan, taking all the environmental out and so on, they came up with just over 100 lots. They then did the cluster plan, and they were there also with the number of lots, 100 some lots. And so that they didn't, going through that process of calculating how many lots, once you take out all the environmental features, we were always getting to the same number and the same number of lots developed on that parcel. Now, if the desire is to go back and start requiring conventional plans again, absolutely, we can start requiring that, and then it would go back to exactly what you're talking about, which is proving the number of lots based on taking the environmental features and so on. We just found through all the projects we looked at that it was not worth the extra expense. But absolutely, that's something that we could go back to if that's the desire.
Well, and it used to be that was the norm, is doing it conventional.
Mm-hmm.
So everything was conventional, and if they wanted to cluster it, they could.
Mm-hmm.
And it was done occasionally. Now it's on everything. And again, I don't see, when I'm looking at these new developments, I'm not seeing a quality layout of a development like we used. And again, I'm not talking about septic, we're talking, everything's on water and sewer here.
Yes.
So it's all, we're all equal. And if you went and looked at these communities and you'd say, gosh, if it was laid out, I mean, I'd rather have a quarter of a lot with a big house on it and not have any yard, or would I rather have my half an acre? Most of Carroll County, the average, and it says it in the Freedom Plan, in these higher, is half an acre. Because people can grow, they can expand, they have a little yard, they can put, we're taking that away. Now, people still buy them because that's all there is, that there is. I don't know that has benefited them, having all that green space for what you just said.
Yeah.
My concern is that's what we're doing for everything, and I don't necessarily, your example of the one property might be true, but I think if you look at the others, it's not always better. It's not always a better, and looking at it on a piece of paper is one thing. When you look at it in reality, you say, wow, how does that benefit? And now they've got to pay to have it maintained forever, this grass, this steep slope, whatever it is, and it could have been part of someone, it could have been part of someone's yard that no one had to maintain.
Yeah.
So I don't see the benefit. I don't see, when I read the code, when I even read the master plan, and it says, houses will be X size. It's misleading because almost everything can be clustered down to the whole next category, to a quarter acre. So I don't see that in any vision that we have the lots make smaller. I look at, I'm just give you another quick example, and this is where sometimes what people think they're telling you they want and what you interpret, and we'll get to this at some other point, but it says some people want, if you read in here, it talks about, various surveys show millennials would prefer to own a home in the suburbs. They want to live in rural areas, and 81% want 3 or more bedrooms. The majority of millennials have a strong preference for owning a single-family detached home. 90% single-family residence, dominate, that's what dominates here. And then it talks about some people, if they prefer smaller lots with less maintenance, an important feature of the area in which they would like to live, a mixed-use neighborhood, they call it, with amenities was deemed desirable. The amenities include a variety of recreational facilities such as trails, pools, ball fields, and other areas that provide social opportunities. Okay, that vision of what that came into the master plan, I don't see anything about counting the steep slopes, the stream beds, or the stormwater management ponds. And when I'm suggesting that particular thing, there's no amenity, there's not even the sidewalk, because the way it's laid out, they can't reach the end of the road to catch the bus, because the sidewalk doesn't go to the end of the road.
Yes, they can, yeah.
Well, they have to go on the road, but,
No, the sidewalk goes all the way out to Oklahoma.
when we went out there, you said it didn't go because it wouldn't fit.
Yeah, I followed that up.
Okay, thank you.
The special report that we were looking at was talking about only one side of the road. There is sidewalk on the other side of the road, so the sidewalk goes all the way out to Oklahoma.
Because the side that I saw said they couldn't fit it because of the slope. Okay, because you want to make sure if they're going to do this, being able to get
Yeah.
out of the street and stand
Sure.
on the bus stop is.
Yeah.
So you understand my saying the definition here that's in this vision doesn't really say that. And it says, it talks here, while a variety of types and lot sizes are permitted, there's not incentives provided for innovative site-building design, creative approaches to the development of land, or for on-site amenities. I believe that when we give away the density, there should be something in return. And if you say something should be R20, and you want to say, okay, let's take it down, there should be something of benefit to the community. I can't see where the stormwater management ponds and the steep slopes and the stream beds are an amenity to give
So-
away the density.
So we're going to get to that in a minute. So, but if I could just clarify one more thing. You said that what you've seen, your primary issue was with the change from gross to net. That change in code happened in 2022. So most of the projects that you see in the ground all predated that and required the conventional plan and so on. So that change has only been very recently. And I don't know how many of the projects I don't know if there are any projects that have been completed that use that gross calculation. So that change in code has been very, very recent.
No, I think it's been the interpretation, and when I say it's the frequency that it was so you're saying.
The code didn't change until '22, so conventional plans with the
Oh,
net
no,
issue.
No, but it's the whole issue of the gross versus the net.
Yeah, and that was all done prior to 2022.
I understand that, but I said but it was not brought forth. I don't know what happened. Something with the planning commission has been encouraging the clustering. In fact, not this one, but there was another that was done, they laid it out both ways, and the developer wanted to go the conventional way, and they encouraged him to go the conventional, the clustered way, and that's the project that has the steep slope, one of them. And my point is, it's been somehow more encouraged, and it never was anticipated like that. This plan, you go back to the 77 plan, I have it written down somewhere, exactly what the clustering should do, and it has not been what the view of that was supposed to be. That's my point. And you can say it's been there since, it's been changed over time, and I've seen it change over time. And there are examples in the old days that were very nicely done, and I'm not opposed to that. I'm opposed to how it's evolved into the product we're ending up with very small lots that are put right on the road. We talked about another one, Oak Creek, and you sent me a picture of it, and it's all the stream bed and the woods are the open space. And the houses are right on the road. They've all put up fences in the easement that are horrendous looking because they put them in the easement, and they're right on the road. It seems to me if that was conventional, they either would have gotten less lots out of it because there was a stream bed. I don't know.
Yeah.
But and that's when we started seeing the changes.
That's
Yes.
the point that Chris was making, is all that was done when we still required a conventional plan.
No, I'm not, I'm saying, I think that was supposed to get fixed, and it didn't get fixed. It sort of got, when I was here during this planning process, that was something that we wanted to get back to what the words say in the book. It says R20 is R20. It talks about what the space should be, and when that's not what's happening. So we believed during this process last time that was going to go back and read the words, what the expectation is versus what was actually being done over time, and this has happened. And they're still not following what the words are in here, what the intentions were.
Okay, so if I can break it into, and I think there are three kind of topics here. The first one is how the yield that's allowable is calculated. And so historically, it was, you did a conventional plan to take all the environmental features and so on, that yield, and then that was the yield that you could then cluster. So, and that changed in 2022. If we want to change how the yield is calculated, we can absolutely talk about that. The second item is the open space and and the requirements for the open space. And whether it's how much needs to be active versus just regular open space, who maintains it and so on. Are there, the way the code is written right now, it gives the developer the options, but then the developer has to decide for their business, what do they want to do? So we require a certain amount of active open space. Do they want to put a fire pit there? Do they want to put a gazebo? They want to turn it into an athletic field? That is up to the developer. If the Board of County Commissioners want to be more directive as far as what the developer has to do with that open space, that's certainly an option. And then there was a third item, but I've now forgotten it.
Well, I'll
Yes.
give you a chance to
Sure.
think that over. Just a quick comment and then two questions. So the discussion earlier about HOAs, anecdotally, my understanding has always been that if there's still a lot remaining in a neighborhood, the developer owns it, the HOA isn't in effect. I mean, that could be good, that could be bad. People don't like paying HOA dues.
I believe that.
But I think that what's important to note about that is the HOA covenants that people have. I would encourage residents to not sleep on those covenants because they actually are powerfully legally. And if you want to prohibit things or allow things, you should probably be reviewing those as a neighborhood. But two quick questions. So they're actually connected. So you're saying that in 2022, and that was our previous board, that's when the net versus gross and the requirement that eliminating the conventional plan requirement, that took place?
Yes.
Okay, so I think there is some validity to the statement that the rules, the ordinances had been interpreted that way for a long time up until then, and I suspect maybe that's why they changed them in 2022, because that's the way it had been done already. So I think that's a concern here, but I wanted to clarify if both of those had changed in 2022, and you're saying yes.
Well, I'm sorry, when you say
That
both.
using the net versus gross formula and
Yep.
no longer requiring conventional plans, that both changed in
Correct.
2022?
Yes, so.
But they're both
go-
basically the same thing.
Yeah, it's essentially the same thing. So
Well,
back in.
one gets you to the other, but I
Yeah.
sort of see them as separate.
Yeah. So the code, going back, and this really hasn't changed since 1965, the code never really specified how you prove what your net developable area was. And policy just kind of evolved, I have no idea when, since 1965, was show a conventional plan, lay out a conventional plan, and that will give you how much yield you can realize on that property. And so that existed all the way up until very recently, where the recognition was that through all of these plans, the conventional plan really didn't prove anything different than if you just have the developer lay out the environmental areas, lay out the required roadways and so on, take the remaining acreage, and then now, because you're clustering, you can use a lower lot size, but you're coming up with the same number of lots that the conventional plan showed, so.
And that was my follow-up
Yeah.
question. So when did, you mentioned something earlier that I guess I didn't really completely understand, but there's a mechanism in there where the lot sizes can automatically be reduced if they're clustering? When did that take place, and when did that take effect?
That's been since 1965.
That's been since 1965,
Yeah.
so you can automatically,
Yes. Now, prior to, I think it was the 22 change, we didn't set a minimum when you clustered. So it used to be that, say if you were R20, you could cluster as small as you wanted. There was no lower bound to it. And then in 22, we added the limit that you couldn't decrease your lot size to anything below half what the original zoning said.
okay.
So.
So prior to 22, you could have gone out of R40 to R10,000
Yep.
if you wanted.
Yes, there was not a limit.
But I will say that I believe that, again, there should be I think there should be a purpose paragraph in front of all of these exceptions. Say, what is the reason we're doing these things? if you read Frederick County, and I know people don't like to be compared to other places, but I like to learn from them, they have the purpose paragraph. Residential cluster development, Frederick County, section 116, 161. The purpose of a cluster development is to provide a method of development that permits variation in lot sizes without an increase in the overall density of population, that allows home buyers a choice of lot sizes according to their needs, that preserves green space, tree cover, scenic vistas, natural drainways, whatever, or preserves the features of the topography. The Planning Commission may permit, now, I think in the past, it was done a lot more selectively, and they had to have these other things. That's just what I see from on the ground in my community. It's changed. Again, there were some very nice communities built that it says they may permit. We're doing on every single one now. Everything is clustered. And it says here, you can only do it where there's public water and sewer, and then the average dwelling density in a residential cluster shall be no greater than the permitted density for the district, built with the maximum of dwellings using net developable land. And that forces you to have, if you're going to do it. Now, I think some would not do it. I think it depends on the topography of a piece of property. Some would say, no, let me just go conventional. I think conventional has worked very well without having fees and without having homeowners associations and people coming and going. So that's they have the purpose. You know, we don't say that. And then when I go back to the Freedom Plan on page 210, open space recreation. It's defined here. Open space is the land area within a development that has been dedicated for the use and enjoyment of all residents of a subdivision development or for the use and enjoyment of the public in general. Now, it's a separately created parcel or lots designated for and recorded as open space as opposed to being preserved for the purpose of through an easement. Recreation pertains to land uses that provide leisure time activities that refresh the body and mind through the forms of play, amusement, or relaxation. That's the words in the. It doesn't talk about stormwater management ponds being the open space, steep slopes, and when I say steep slopes, I'm talking like this. I don't even know how they mow it. And number 3 is the stream beds. We don't really want people walking around the stream beds, but that's
My
what's in
kids
here.
loved playing
I
in stream
know.
beds.
Okay. So that could, and the other good thing I've said before, even if this stuff was dedicated to the county, in our area, opposed to the wonderful towns that we have that have, somehow they acquire open space from some of these developments, we don't have an open space anywhere in our community except for the big parks that are, miles away. There's not an acre of an open space for somebody to go walk to, as opposed to the town of Sykesville that has 13 of them, 13 parks and for 4,000 people. Some of this envisioned could be that there was dedicated park so that we would have a place to put a bench. I'm just saying that's even beyond my dreams of having something like that. But it's not, the way it's defined here, the way it's envisioned with the people and with the people that wrote the plan who did a nice job on it, and the definitions in here, and even if you look at the definitions in our code of R20,000, it doesn't say, it doesn't even allow, it says shall be this. Residential subdivision with lot sizes between a half an acre and a quarter acre, up to 4 acres, which one is that? No, high density. Lot sizes, it tells you in here what high density is, what low density is, what medium density is, and it doesn't align with how they're interpreting the current clustering. Again, if we're going to go through the process of doing the master plan, we're trying to make our communities be better. And in the old days, years ago, this is how we laid out most of Carroll County. And the development quality and what's happening is not quality. It's not a quality development anymore. And that's what we're trying to get, like that in our part of the neck of the woods that the county controls, just like the towns and the outside of the community do. And we don't see this as a benefit.
So if I could recommend, Daphne's going to walk through what our current code is, which the code are the rules that the developers need to follow. And in theory, the code was derived from the concepts and the desires of the master plans. As we go through the codes, if there are specific items in the code that you have question or issue with, let's note them, and then we can absolutely explore how do we amend those codes to meet the goals that you're trying to achieve.
And I'd like to say one more thing about Mineral Hills, a couple more things. One, I think if we want to do different calculations, fine. During the original plan, forget about the cost of time if that cost the developer 60 grand, that's increased every house in this subdivision by about $4,500. The people are paying for it, and I'm not sure they're getting anything out of it. The question came up on paving. This clustering eliminates at least a third of the paving.
We actually, I'm sorry to interrupt, we actually go through a cost comparison of the conventional versus the cluster.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and I'm sure you do. And the stormwater management, the homeowners would not have to maintain the environmental areas. I don't know if I agree with it, but the facts, currently, people want walking paths more than they want any other kind of recreation, which I don't know that I agree with. We talked this morning, I'm more about the kids recreating than us old people. But do they have to do anything to maintain the environmental areas?
No.
So this subdivision has 0 that they need to maintain. And again, I understand steep slopes. On the conventional plan, they were building lots in there. And I'm an advocate. I wish they would have decreased these lot sizes. When you mass grade with smaller lots, you take care, there's no more steep slopes left, especially in today's world with retaining walls.
Yeah.
Well, if you come visit the area that you don't represent, you would see that there are steep slopes that don't have retaining walls. So, I mean, I'm just saying, it's interesting.
And when were they built?
A couple of years ago?
Couple.
5 years ago, 10 years
Yeah.
ago?
The
Yeah.
one you're referring to was built when they had to do a commercial.
Are the steep slopes in
conventional-
open space?
No.
They're owned
They're not in open
privately.
space, they're on private lots.
Yes.
So again, if you buy a lot with steep slopes, I hope you know what you're buying.
Those ones.
Commissioner Collar, you represent your area, I represent mine.
I
And-
represent the entire county,
Well, then
trust
come
me.
to, okay, well, let's have a meeting down there and we'll find out if this is what people want in the Freedom District. And if they think this is good, I mean, that's all I say.
No,
Just
I
come see it,
understand.
and you didn't sit through the meetings, you didn't come to a
And we can
master.
have different opinions, but the facts are the facts are the facts. There's 0 they have to maintain here. I don't care what happened 5 years ago, I want to move forward.
And
do
you're
the
you're
best
using
thing
one
for the-
example here, and I appreciate this one. This is what,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of other examples that are in here.
And I want as affordable housing as we can get in Carroll County, and when you add 4 or 5 grand to every house for a thing that could have been a calculation, that doesn't make sense for the
And as
people.
you know, I think you know, the market drives the cost. No one has ever showed me a connection between that, and we can go to another project for that, and marketability, because the cost is, the market is the market. So, I don't know if.
How
what
many
you-
lots have you sold? Because I've sold about 3,000, and that's not correct.
And you're an expert on this stuff, I know, but.
No,
yeah.
I'm not an expert. I wish I was an expert, but I can tell you, each house will pay that 4,500.
I'm just talking to you, what we have in our plan, what we've done forever in Carroll County, in my area, is these kinds of lots. Our 20,000 is not huge, it's just a little bit of land that people come to Carroll County for. They come here for that, that's why it's in the master plan. I'm just saying, the value of the clustering that we're getting today is not the value that was expected and has been done over the years in some areas. Every project is being clustered. Some of them it's better, some of them might work out better, and some of them may not work out better, but it is the norm, and we might as well just rezone everything and turn it into R20, because that's what it is. And then if you have R20, it's really being clustered down to R10. So it's called truth in advertising, and in our code, it doesn't say that. It says, this is what medium density is, it says this. That's not what we're doing. So it's just, it is not, you can call it the truth or not, read the words.
Yeah, many of the lots in Westminster are R10.
Yeah, and there's
they-
places
they
for that.
sell, And I know very few young kids that want more than that.
Oh, really? Okay, well, we have different populations that we serve. And then that's what it says right here in this book, that people move here for more space. So maybe in your area, they want R10 and they want to live like that,
I
but,
don't care what that piece of paper says.
Okay.
I know what kids
Okay.
want.
well, we have a master
I deal
plan
with
that we're
it.
supposed to follow, and I assume that,
Then we need to correct it. Go ahead,
Okay.
I'm sorry.
and if you
Can
think
I-
everybody should be R10, then I think you should go to your town and you talk them into doing that.
Maybe
Well-
we can continue to walk through this example. We have a few other examples we can look at.
Daphne, I'm sorry. Before you go through this, because I think it's important to understand that The clustering is an option that is allowed via the code, and it is proposed by the developer. So the developer comes with, I would like to do this, and then the code authorizes the planning commission for them to move forward with the clustering. So that's important to know as we go into the example, right? That they had to prove that they were meeting all the requirements in the code to the planning commission in order for the planning commission to then authorize that clustering.
So question, so in the Freedom District, how many projects, what percentage of projects are being done clustered versus conventional? On R 20, 40, and 10?
So I don't have the total number of residential projects. I believe you have that as we gave you in
You know,
August,
everyone that
the
I saw,
list.
everyone I've seen is clustered. Everyone on that list is clustered.
We are currently processing 4 cluster plans of subdivision of all the county. There are 4 in process, and 2 of those are in District 5.
Okay.
So 2.
But, I mean, and the ones in the past, some of the ones, they pretty
Right,
much all
yeah.
have been clustered, I'd say over the last decade that I can see. And it says it right on the thing, clustered. So
Yeah.
I think the reason they're moving that direction is because of the ability to, and it's cheaper for them to develop. And again, market drives the cost. I mean, this house on this land is going to probably go for the cost on this land, but that's not really what the people want. That's my point. And then they have homeowner fees for the rest of ever to take care of it.
All right, so we'll start with the number of lots allowed. So as we previously stated, the number of lots allowed based on the gross area of this particular parcel would have been 20. As you saw in the conventional plan, they laid it out and was already lower than that. So this was 15, the cluster plan was 14. So again, just to reiterate, whether you do conventional plan or cluster plan, there is no provision for additional lots. You can't get more than you would normally be able to get by clustering.
Well, you know, and I'm just going to stop you there because that is directly opposite to what I pull up online that shows you that it is. And if you just Google, you know, Maryland clustering, and it shows you the net versus the gross, and it depends on the property. But again, every situation is different, and if you just,
No, I'm saying in our code, you're not allowed to get more
More than-
lots than you would under your traditional.
No, but if
conventional
you
plan.
had the net, you would end up getting less, because you're ending up having to put them closer together to build because of the available building space. That's
Yeah.
my point. Your
I
lot
mean, I
size
guess
is getting
we'd
smaller.
have to look at each of those plans, but I think what Chris was saying is that even when we were calculating based on the net, we were not seeing more than what you typically would have been able to get through the.
It's the lot size that changes. I
conventional.
understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm saying the lot size is what's
Yeah.
changing.
Lot
It's not
size is different, lot yield, not anymore. Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing with you. It's the actual usability of the space and who owns it and what you're getting out of it.
But you're still getting the same number of houses.
You're not getting any more. You're not getting more.
Correct, yes.
Right, that was.
But if you kept your minimum lot size and you did the net, it would be different. You're picking one property. I think if you look at some others, you'd see it.
Yeah, we can look at lots of other examples and try to compare them. Okay, let's talk about lot size then. In this example, the our 20,000 district has a minimum lot size of 20,000. When you're doing a conventional plan, the clustering provision allows that to go down to 10,000 square feet. So you see here what the range in lot sizes were.
And I think a key thing here is that it provided the developer with more flexibility in working with the parcel that he was working with. He could have, if he had wanted to, tried to squeeze up to 20, because 20 is the maximum allowable on that property, tried to decrease those lot areas all to 10,000 square feet, because that's the minimum, but he didn't do that for whatever market forces, for whatever the site and so on. And that's the reality that we saw through all of the examples that we saw and why we changed the code. that you don't have to do the conventional plan, is because this is what the developer chose to do. And even though he had the options of making smaller lots and so on. So you see a range here that maybe a little more than half of them are now below that 20,000 square feet, but some of them are pretty close and some of them are larger. So that was, the developer had that flexibility is I guess what I'm getting
And this
at.
is one example, this is one example of a
Yeah.
lot that are not quite similar to this. But
Okay, when we talk about how that reduction in lot size gets handled, you can see that the reduction in lot size, as I mentioned earlier, when you take the standard lot size and the difference between that and the ultimate lot area for each lot, that gives you your required open space. In this case, the reduction in lot sizes meant a required open space of 53,101 square feet, and they provided more than double that when you look at, when you combine both the stormwater management area and the open space parcel. I mean, even if stormwater management weren't included in that calculation, their open space parcel is still close to double of what they're required.
We don't require
spaces.
active open space. We only
we do.
We
require.
do,
We'll get there in a second.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry.
And I'm going to get some kudos from Laura if I mention this. With this particular project, when this went before the Planning and Zoning Commission, the stormwater management parcel was not even talked about as meeting the open space.
Yeah.
It was only pointed out that the open space parcel of 94,000 square feet was meeting their open space requirement. They didn't even mention the stormwater. But the reality is per our code, you can also count the stormwater. So that's why I wanted to make that clear, that that's how the code reads. But per the Planning Commission and the discussion with the Planning Commission, the stormwater parcel was not mentioned as part of
Yeah.
that open space requirement.
And they still have over 50% more than they
Yes.
had to have.
Yes.
Okay, this one is an easy one. We now require that cluster subdivisions in the residential and historic districts must be served by public water or public water and sewer, and this one is. Also in the residential and historic districts, excuse me, the common open space shall not be less than 15% of the gross acreage. And so you see those calculations here. The gross acreage was just over 400,000 square feet. 15% of that would have been just over 60,000 square feet, and the open space provided is almost 132,000 square feet. So they are providing 33% of the gross acreage in open space as opposed to
Sorry.
the minimum, which is 15.
And can you describe that open space?
You mean what the lay of the land is?
Well, I mean, all of it, this particular one is, it's steep slopes and trees. So I'm
But-
just saying it's not, unless you can hike up the hill, but, I mean, I guess, as I said, as we define open, I guess I should ask it differently. As it is defined in the book, under the Freedom Comprehensive Plan, it's defined, I just read it to you, dedicated to the use of enjoyment for all facilities, all residents, separately created lot for open space and enjoyment. So explain to me how that, to provide leisure time activities that refresh the body, play, amusement, relaxation. Tell me how that open space complies with that. I see what I think it is, and I'm not picking on this. This development is sort of the least of my worries. There were other ones that I think that were a lot more representative of what I'm talking about than this particular one. But even on this one, I don't exactly know how it fits that space of what people think the open space should be and how I think it's interpreted. I'm going to say this. I am here to represent building good communities that will be around for a long time. That's why I'm here. Developers, hey, I want to work with them too. They come and go. They're gone, I think it can be done and be win-win for everybody if our expectations were clear. When you have unclear expectations and they're changing, it's not fair to anyone that's involved. But having quality developments, which we've had for many years, I keep saying that, there's many examples of how these communities have been built, and it has been changed. And I don't think they're as stable of neighborhoods, people come and go. I think some of our older developments, because you have room to expand. If you have a house and you want to expand, you have room to put your pool in, you have room to put your playground in, your own yard, when you have space. So I know that people in my area move to Carroll County so they have a little bit of space. It might be moving from a townhouse to a quarter acre or from a quarter acre to, that's why they're here.
Yeah.
And maybe in your area, where you are, they don't care about that. In my area, they do. I know the people, and that's why they put it in the plan. And that's why we had many meetings about it, and that's why we want it reflected in what actually happens on the ground. And they say, how did this happen? Because we can take something and call it a certain thing, and we can reduce it down to half of that. That's not truth in lending. Reducing something by 10% or 20%, but I don't think this is what was envisioned. And I've said that a number of times, and
Yeah.
it's just, again, why do we go through this process of the master plan to get what people want, and then say, oh, but we don't care what they want? I never look, and I know Kenny said he never looked at the book, he's never read the plan. Okay, that's fine. I have read the plan many times. I was there for the plan. It's my district, it's my community,
Yeah.
and I care about it.
Yeah, totally understand.
Just like
So
you care
two
about the
quick things.
transmission lines.
Yeah.
I care about this.
So, regarding how things have changed over the past few decades, the code for the cluster plans has really not changed all that
It's
much.
been the interpretation of it.
And that, I'm sure you're absolutely correct, that the interpretation of it has changed. So if at this point, the Board of County Commissioners wishes to dial in that code to get back to what was envisioned before, or dial it into something that it's currently not, absolutely we can do that, and love to have those discussions.
And the one other thing I don't
Yeah.
understand, it says may in there, and I haven't followed this, but supposedly if it says may and the planning commission votes against it and doesn't want it, and for other issues, they can go to the Board of Zoning Appeals and they have a
Yes.
de novo hearing and they start
Yes.
over, and many times it's being overturned. Is that something unique to us that they're sort of starting over with the whole argument? Is that unique, or, so how do we make sure that there is some kind of flexibility if it does make a better product? But if they don't think it makes a better product, that they can't be overturned at the next level because they may do something?
I'm going to defer to the lawyer in the room.
That's, I believe, state law, that the planning commission decisions, certain ones at least, can be appealed to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We can get you more information.
But you know what I'm saying, on this particular issue, it seems like it says may, but if they take it to the next level, they say, oh, well, you may, they should have done it.
And then they can appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals to
Yeah,
consider.
I understand, but you know what I'm saying, how do we make it so it's truth in lending, and if we get a benefit out of
Yeah.
it, then we'd say you can, but if you don't really get a benefit,
You can
There-
eliminate clustering.
well, we've had it, we can eliminate clustering, I mean, but if maybe if we might have to, just to have it truthful to what we're doing, but we had done it well for a long time, but I'm not opposed to that, because, go ahead.
So real quick,
That's-
just to
that's
address
option
your,
the board has.
just to real quick address your question about open space. So there's a description of open space in the Freedom Plan. And then that needs to be codified so that everybody is aware. And this is the definition that's in our code for open space. And that's what we described before.
And is this new, is that definition new?
No, that's been,
And see, that's where I'm saying,
Around
and this is just
2.1.
one example, but that's where I think the code does not reflect it does not reflect necessarily what's in the plan. And these things, as you said, only can happen on water and sewer. I believe, 95%, it happens in the Freedom District. The other areas are controlled by the towns, and they have a lot of say in what they allow. And they're looking for good development too.
Yeah.
And many of the towns aren't growing at all, so the growth is all happening in this one area. So you want
Yeah.
it to be nice.
yeah. So if the board wishes to amend the definition of open space, we can certainly have that discussion.
And what's active and what's not active, and what's useful. and
Yes, yep, and I think Daphne's going to get to that in a second,
Okay.
with it related specifically to the code.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to call your attention to this photo, I think you had asked what's on the ground. You can see on the sort of the left-hand side of the outlined area in blue, that's what is part of, no, it doesn't. Oh, there we go.
So I'm going to try and do this left-handed, that's not going to work.
That's the area
This-
that is
This light.
identified for open space on that left-hand side there.
Yeah, there's an L shape here, that's the remaining open space, that's all
Yeah.
wooded.
Yeah, and that's the hilly, that's the slopey hilly side, okay. That's open space. I mean,
Yeah, so, I mean, and then you look at the conventional plan, this is rotated 90 degrees, but under the conventional plan, a lot of that wooded area probably would have been cleared for those lots, and then
and what's the size of those lots compared to what they were on the other plan? Like, I
it's
can't
about 20,000, you can see on the
So
the
they're more,
table on
they're
the
more
right-hand
they're more
side.
close to the size of the half acre.
Yeah.
Yeah, they
conventional
range,
plan.
you can see the numbers there. They range from just a hair over 20,000 square feet to, I think the largest is 24,000
Gotcha, I
square
see, I
feet,
see.
lot one. And then if you go to the next slide, there's the list of the 14 lots then, which you have some that get down as low as 11,000, but you have the largest is 22,000 square feet.
And you do have 6 under 15.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see here where the, oops. Sorry. You can see here where that wooded area, which would have been on private property and had houses on it, is preserved there, and I think these are stormwater maps.
And that's the stormwater facility to the right there, that block, yeah. That's just a highlight of the open space. So the block to the right is the stormwater facility, the block to the left is the open space parcel.
Oh, you know, I should have mentioned, on that picture of the conventional, the existing neighborhood that's in the conventional, the houses are pushed further away. That existing neighborhood's been there for almost, 50, 60 years? I forget the name of it. And that was all woods behind them. And now the houses are right behind their lot lines. And it was supposed to be R20. They thought it was, this conventional layout makes a bigger distance between those original houses that have been there forever and the houses in front of them, which is a big deal to them because they thought theirs was built on R20, conventional, years ago. I don't know what they called it back then. And if the expectation was that they'd have some space. So right now, these houses are actually, I believe they're closer to the lot line for the existing houses that have been there on Hannah Road.
Okay. So another wrinkle on the open space is that you're required to have at least 50%, at least 15% of the gross acreage
But you
in
got-
open space. But,
Sorry.
but a maximum of 50% of that can be steep slopes, streams, ponds, water courses, and floodplains. So, so in this case, going back to the slide before, the required open space, that wasn't the, so the required open space was 53,101 square feet. 50% of that, or 26,550, under our code, is allowed to be some of these sensitive environmental features. The other 50% has to be non-environmental lands. So in this case, 26,550 could be encumbered by unusable environmental topography. The majority on this particular site, the majority of that 131,990 that they're providing is not in that sensitive environmental features. Oops, sorry. Okay, now we get to some of the differences in the types of open space as well. So a minimum of 10% of the required open space or 1.5 acres, whichever is greater, has to be suitable for active recreational use, and can't exceed a grade of 3%. That means it's kind of an open field where kids could play, kick a ball, whatever, and it's not going to go down a steep slope into the stream. So in this case, our required space, open space, again, 53,101, 10% of that, or 5,310 square feet, has to be active, or 1.5 acres, whichever is greater. In this case, it's 65,340 square feet. However, for tracts or parcels less than 10 acres, the Planning and Zoning Commission can approve deviations from these percentage requirements.
And they normally do. I mean, this particular one they did. Is that
This
true?
one
This
is a
one we
little
did.
bit less than 10 acres, so this provision was applicable.
So less than 10 acres, you don't have to do anything, okay.
You can make adjustments, yes.
Yeah,
And I think what I'm trying to say, 100% of the time, pretty much, they're making adjustments on this stuff. In recent years, they're making adjustments for all these down to the lowest common denominator. It's not like what's best for the community, it's best for, yeah, they asked for it, let's do it.
Yeah, and certainly if that's a code change to get rid of the ability for the planning commission to make that adjustment, what I would suggest here is that if you have a 9.2 acre a parcel that they're looking to develop, and they're required to have an acre and a half of active open space, so an active field on that, that's a pretty heavy lift for someone who's trying to develop 9 acres. Is that an acre and a half? Now, if that's the desire of the board, absolutely can make that change.
And each community is different, and I
Yeah.
say that, I just want it to be the best product that can be,
Sure.
and I'm not sure if that's necessarily, when you have a local planning commission, like in the towns, they're trying to get the best development possible, because they're accountable to the people.
Yeah.
Our planning commission, not that they're not good and they're not trying hard, they're basically reading the rules. It's not their community that they live in, and it's, and they've got the rules, they're saying they can do this, we'll let them do it. And it's not necessarily a negotiation, it's like they can, so we will. When it's your own area, when it's your own Westminster or Tawnytown, those people on that planning commission want it to be a nice development. They're leaving this legacy. And it's a different, you're trying to negotiate and say, hey, how about this, how about that? So we all are winners, and that's what we're missing here, because I'd say probably, I'll say 95% of the time, 100% of the time, they're giving them whatever. And just saying, you can do this, sure, we'll let you do it. It's not like, oh, that doesn't make sense on this particular property. I've not seen that.
And I'm just curious if that is more of a result of all the projects that have come through in the past decade or so, are these smaller, less than 10 acre size developments? Or is that, because the code only allows the planning commission to make that adjustment if it's less than 10 acres. So they can't make that adjustment if it's larger, so,
I don't know the answer.
yeah. But I think you're going to talk about how the,
yeah, so just in this particular case, the stormwater management is being put underground. And so that'll leave a flat grass surface area, which provides 37,816 square feet of active open space. And the planning commission did discuss and determine that this was sufficient. And you can see the calculations there, that square footage is about 71% of their required open space, so obviously greater than 10%.
And I applaud them for putting it underground. I think when you're building this type of home, I mean, it depends on the size of the stormwater management pond. They're not attractive, what we're doing necessarily here. I mean, we got to do them.
I think they're all attractive.
Oh, and you're a stormwater guy. The average person does not think that they're attractive. I know you love stormwater, but that's unusual. But I applaud them for that, because in this development, it's going to be a nice development, it's going to be expensive homes, and it might, I don't know what the cost is, but if it's $4,500 on a $800, $900 million house, I think for the rest of I think that's a little bit to invest. I don't know if that's the cost differential or not. I don't know how the maintenance is compared to underground, I mean, above surface. But I've been told that it's actually better, because for environmental reasons, it's cooler water, it's not infestation of birds, and just different things. There's been pros and cons of why they're moving in that direction of the underground. But
So I can tell you for underground facilities, the cost is typically at least 2.5 to 3 times more expensive to go underground, and the long-term operation and maintenance is much more expensive because of you're putting something underground. It's not easily to get to it, and so the cost, if you have to repair something, you're digging up all this material and so on. So a lot of jurisdictions try and steer developers away from going underground, because those jurisdictions then take on that higher operation and maintenance cost.
I'm reading the opposite, but that's okay. I mean, there's always competing information about what people, and I'm not an expert on it.
Yeah, and we're we're trying to find out, so any information you have on exact developers or developments that have been required to be put
No,
underground, we're trying to find out because we've not
I think
been successful in finding
I
any.
think I explained that at the beginning. It's not in the code, but by the requirement of, like, malls do it. I mean, almost all shopping centers do it. I mean, any
Yes.
commercial all does it. So it's commonly done, it's just not as
Yeah.
common for
Yes.
residential.
Yeah.
It is very common in Montgomery counties where they have high-density residential.
Yeah, sure.
Everything's underground. I mean,
So, I'm sorry to interrupt, but so you're absolutely correct in that stormwater management regulations have to be met. So if you're developing something or redeveloping something, you can't get a variance out of it, you have to address it. And so when you're in these higher density areas, the means of performing stormwater management decrease, right? So having the nice, pretty open pond and so on may not be feasible in a higher density area. So now you're looking at green roofs, you're looking at things like that, you're looking at putting things underground. So the development itself, the site design limitations may lend itself to going underground as being the best option. But that's something that the developer and their engineer move towards. It's not required by any of the jurisdictions.
and I'll just say it's truth in lending. If you say something's going to be a certain size, and you say your it's defining the open space and using your stormwater management and these other things on the gross, that is the problem. And then it would force, if they want to continue to do the project they want to do, they'd have to choose between giving the space or going underground.
Yeah.
It's not mandated, but it's sort of mandated that you have a choice of these two things.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
one way or another, it's not being prescriptive, it's being, we want the outcome to be this, and you figure out how to do it.
Yes, exactly.
And it sounds like this is a good example of that choice being made.
Yes, and it is a good example.
Yes.
I give them credit for that. That's a very good, and it's a great developer. They've done a lot of great projects in our area. I'm just saying what we allow and how we allow it. They've done a lot of good projects in our Carroll County.
Okay, so continuing through our code, some of these sections are not really applicable. Number 6 relates to transfer of development rights, not applicable here. And in order to be eligible for clustering, all lot yield from the entire property shall be included on the preliminary subdivision, and that was done.
And you also mentioned earlier on about preparing all these plans. It is in the preliminary stage of discussion that this would occur. I mean,
Concept.
the concept.
Yeah.
It's not like you're drawing up all the pages that are required for the stormwater, which is voluminous, but it's in the concept phase. And the one thing that I guess I'm trying to figure out too, when I talk to other communities, they say, yeah, we can negotiate and have these discussions on the front end. And I'm trying to figure out who has those discussions and who is the one saying, yeah, we want this, or is it staff? Because by the time the planning commission, it's like recommended to them. I'm just trying to say, how do we put it in our code? Here's our purpose. Here's what we want. The elected body that was elected to fulfill the plans, to make sure we follow the plans. How do we make sure that those discussions do happen on the front end? Because I don't think, it's not right for a developer to go down this road and then
Yeah.
change things, but I've said before, it's been interpreted the way I believe it should have been, and that discussion should have happened on the very front end.
We actually just changed a policy for development review a year, at this point, maybe 2 years, that when we have our pre-submittal meeting with developers, we offer that they can come before the planning commission for a presentation that they do. Staff does not participate, but we give them that forum that they can come before the planning commission and explain exactly what it is they want to do, discuss it with the planning commission, get feedback, and so on. So we added that step. It's a purely optional. We don't require them to do that, but that is a recent change that we made, I think it was 2 years ago, because we did hear some of those concerns from the development community that it wasn't until the end of concept that was the first time that they were before planning commission to get feedback. So we added this in so that they can come in and they can have 15, 20 minutes, do a sales pitch, and get feedback and so on, sort of informally. Before they do any engineering, they can come in with this back of the napkin, this is what we want to do with our property.
That's good. And also the planning commission, two things they should be doing. Making sure they're always referring to the Bible, which is the master plan. That's why we do it. If you're not going to follow it, then just don't bother going through the process. And number 2, we need to make sure that our zoning is aligned with that. And number 3, they need to come out and see after the fact what, in the old days, the Planning Commission Board of Zoning Appeals always visited. They did site visits. a couple times a year, so they could see it. It's hard to, you look at this piece of paper, you look at this on a map, it looks very different, as you know. I took you around, and thank you for
Yeah.
that. Daphne, too, thank you.
Yes.
I do appreciate it.
Yes.
But it's different, then you say,
Yeah.
gosh, this is what this ends up looking like.
Yeah.
Could we improve? And I'm always about continuous improvement, and these communities are gonna be around for a long time. We wanna make them the best they can be for the citizens that are moving to
Yeah.
Carroll County and what they expect.
And we have begun discussions
have.
with Planning Commission that we will be doing that.
Thank you.
I think I'm assuming that it may have been a COVID thing, that those
No,
stopped.
it's
or-
been before that, because
Was it-
when the
yeah.
last witness master plan was being done, there were members back then that had never been to the Freedom area.
Interesting.
And I complained about that.
Yeah.
And they now see why.
Yep.
So anyway,
No,
it's
totally
been-
agree.
I don't
That's
know why,
worthwhile.
when
Yeah.
it started, but it was before COVID.
Yep.
Okay, we'll roll through the comparison that I think Chris had mentioned earlier in terms of the costs for conventional versus cluster plans. You can see here all of the different costs that might be part of a development, everything from the site preparation to the installation of the water and sewer. Our big things that I think we want to point out here is the bottom line being the bonding for the, this doesn't
Which-
seem right. Something is not.
I put this together, so I'll walk through it. So the information in this table, the left column, the cluster plan bonding, all came from the bonding, the Public Works Agreement and the estimates from the contractor that was building this project. So that middle column are a pretty spot-on sort of cost estimates. And every aspect that we bond, from the roadway to grading to stormwater management, stakeout, and so on, those all came from the contractor who is currently building this. And this is the amount that was bonded for the project. To compare that cost as to if it was done from a conventional perspective, there were two kind of metrics that I just, silly wild ass guess kind of estimates. The first is that from a roadway perspective, the roadway was 50% longer for the conventional plan. So anything related to the roadway, I added 50%, or I doubled the cost, right? From an acreage of development, the conventional plan had 33% more acreage developed. So that would affect your grading and all of those sorts of things. So I added 33% to the cluster plan. So I wouldn't, the numbers in the right column are a best guess using those very basic, whether, if it was roadway, double it, if it was overall site, 33% more. The point being is that we would estimate that this project would cost $800,000 more to the developer to build the conventional plan than the cluster plan. And I think that's sort of evidenced in that they actually decreased the number of lots. I mean, they're not required to cluster. They could have built the conventional plan with 15 lots, but it would have cost them $800,000 more. Or they went with the cluster plan, lost a lot, but they're saving the $800,000. So that's a business decision that they made, and it's understandable why they made that decision. Now, what I would add is that there are some county costs associated with this that they're relatively small, but they add up over time. If that roadway were twice as long, I've talked with the Bureau of Engineering as far as what the costs are, and the Bureau of Utilities, for that additional paving and that additional, the additional utilities as an O&M costs to the county. And if that conventional plan had been built, it would have cost the county an estimated $5,000 per year for that additional length of roadway forever. So $5,000 per year, in the grand scheme of our overall budget, not a big deal, right? But when you start talking about all the development and so on, those numbers start to add up.
Let me ask a question about the
Yes.
roadway. Because the roadway, you're talking about the development roadway for the road.
Yes.
So what about the costs of all the flag lots that are going off of that court? So now you have, what, 5 flag lots or 7? So does that include, because you're now paving, instead of paving one road to get to smaller, you're paving everybody's flag lot to go up. So you've basically taken the cost from the development of it and put it onto the homeowner and the person buying the house. So you've got
Yes.
now how many driveways are up? 5 or 7?
Right.
What's our maximum? 7 that we allow on
On a-
flag lots?
Yes.
Okay, so you've now gone from taking the court up, and everybody has a smaller piece to go out, to now 7 more pieces. So you got
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
more roadway in the end, because everybody's got to make the driveways in the cost of the house. So at some point, that electric still has to get to the house, the utilities have to get to the house, and the driveway has to get, so instead of one court taking you all the way down, you now have a court taking you halfway down and all these driveways going off of it that are longer.
Yes, but in this example, as we showed, the open space is at the far end. So in the conventional plan, there were lots all the way down at that end. Now it's clustered up to the front, and so there's less overall roadway, even when considering the use in common driveways.
Well, and on this particular one, that could be true. I just don't know on all of them, because you're adding all these driveways, but now add cost to those people, that all these people now have to pay to get their whole long driveway done. On this one, I'm looking at the road, and I'm thinking, gosh, if the road gone down, you could have saved 7 driveways, or 5, whatever it is. But I'm not a big fan of common driveways, of living on one with just 2 people. They're not the best thing in the world for, maintenance and things like that. But when you've got 7 different ones coming off of a court, I just don't, we never used to do it like that.
Who maintains that use in common driveway?
The property owners.
The property, not the homeowners, not the
Well, the-
individual property owners?
Yeah, so whenever a development is done with a use in common driveway, there's a document that gets recorded called a Declaration of Maintenance Obligations, which legally lays out who is responsible for the maintenance of that use in common driveway. The county doesn't get involved with that. We often get asked, hey,
Yep.
my neighbor who's on the UIC with me won't pay his fair share, what can the county do? Completely a civil matter. We are not involved in that at all. But we do require that declaration of maintenance obligations to be recorded in the land records. So it's official and a legal binding document that the property owners who buy those and are on a use in common know
Yep.
that they've got to perform maintenance and work with their neighbors.
And the water sewer is an enterprise fund, so less maintenance is less everybody's water bill.
Yes.
So I want to try to sort of circle back to why we're here and everything, but, and so we've obviously got some decisions to make, but what I think, so I haven't heard any commissioner yet say they're against clustering. I think that's important to mention. But in the particular case of Mineral Hill, the lots that were at the end of that courtyard, the court, were they even buildable? I mean, so this isn't all just about cost. I mean, some of this is about lots that you just can't build on without spending even more money.
Yes.
I think that's just important to mention here, that it's.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in this case, those are buildable.
Those
There are-
were buildable
Yes,
lots.
the steep slopes, if you see just to the left of where it says Road A, the steep slopes are,
In the stormwater management.
you have to push the button on the top.
I mean, if you say they were buildable, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's all I'm looking for. You don't have to, prove it. I'm just,
So-
that certainly would be the case sometimes, though.
Yeah.
So the lots just aren't buildable. So if you put together a conventional plan, you'd know going in that some of these lots just aren't going to work, but clustering's an option.
Yeah.
And I think the issue that some of us are kind of considering now is it being implemented properly? Are there some improvements we can make and things of that nature?
Yeah.
I think that's important to mention here.
Yeah, so the steep slopes are represented on here.
Some of those look pretty steep.
So right here, you see this kind of
Yeah.
shaded area, that's a steep slope, and that's being developed as part of the cluster plan. And then this area right in through here are some steep slopes. This is right on this is where the stormwater management is going in. These areas down here that are being preserved as open space are not steep slopes.
Okay.
They're forested.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
So on the example
Yes.
of the conventional, it's all gross acreage on that. You start with gross, and then you divide those spaces between each of the lots, is that correct? And then there's no maintainable open space. Is that?
So the way the code is right now, that was changed in 2022, you start with your gross acreage. In this
Okay,
case,
we're talking conventional now.
Well, just in general for development, right? So you start with your 9.2 acres, and your lot yield on R20 says that you could have 20 lots on that. Previous to 2022, we required the developer to then lay out the conventional plan, which is, this predates 2022, so they did that, to show how many lots, when you take out the environmental features, there weren't any on here that, on Mineral Hill, that had to be excluded. But there was roadway dedication that needed to be taken out, there's the public road that needs to be taken out. You're left then with a net acreage that's developable.
Okay, so you use that on conventional, you do use the gross.
Yes.
You do take,
Yeah.
all right, so you're using the
That was
net.
the whole purpose.
Yeah, that's the whole
I just-
purpose of it,
I
yeah.
just want to verify
Yeah.
that I was right about
And
that.
then, so you take the net acreage that's left, and then you divide that by your 20,000 square feet. And but it's a little more complex than that, because the developer with their engineer kind of lays it out. And that nobody makes a whole series of 20,000 square foot lots.
Right.
It's one's 24,000, the next one's 23, and so on, working with the topography and so on. And so from
And
a.
they can even be like 19.9 or, right?
Yeah,
A little, like-
we might flag them on that, just, come on.
I just thought.
Yeah, and so the conventional plan then lays out, and they came up with 15 lots that they were able to accomplish. After 2022, where we are now, we still do that gross acreage calculation and say, you can't get any more than 20 lots on here. And so what the developer does is they go through that same process. They look at the environmental features, they look at the roadways and so on. We set a minimum, so for R20, you can't go any below R10, whereas prior to 2022, you could go lower than that 10,000. And they lay out their subdivision using those rules. And what we've seen in this example and many, many others was that the number of lots that they come up with compared to the conventional, they often will come in less when they start factoring all those things in. And in this case, they came up with 14 lots that they wanted to use. Some of them are less than the 20, some of them are more. It gives the developer that flexibility.
You mean 20,000 square feet?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, not 20 lots.
Yes, yes.
Just making sure our 20.
And this is
understood.
this is a challenging property because of there are some that are just flat, so it's different, they're all different. This
Yes.
is taking advantage of that
Yes.
with the
Yeah,
challenging
and
property.
that's,
If there's
and,
anything flat.
yeah. And honestly, that fundamentally is the challenge that you all and we have, is that every site is different. And we need to have codes that can cover every scenario. And so the codes are the basics of what, here's the plate. A local lawyer has used the terminology. We set the plate, and then the developers come and they figure out how they're going to accomplish what they're trying to accomplish once we've set that plate. Now, if the Board of County Commissioners wishes to redefine that plate and put additional restrictions and say, well, we want more active open space when you cluster, we can absolutely change that. If you want to say that a developer has to put a trampoline park in that open space, we can say that. But the way the code is, it just sets the plate. It says you have to have this open space, and then the developer looks at its business model and says, you know what, I want to put a gazebo here. I think for my community, that's what we want. Or I would suspect that they wait until they start selling these homes and they start talking to the residents and say, hey, I've got this open space that I'm required to produce an amenity for you. It's nice and flat and open, but what would you like here? And then they work with that. So the question becomes, do we want to dictate that to the developer and get some more of what you would like to see, or
It's
do
not
we
me,
allow?
it's our community wants to see.
Right, yes. Or do we allow the developer to work with the community that's moving into those lots to then put what they feel is appropriate?
And one of the other things it talks about is just variety of housing, and it's not this development, but in some of these developments, we talk about variety, and we're getting no variety. It's all exactly the same. And they're all, I say, nice layout. This is all, you look down the road at nice communities, how they meander. Many of them are just like straight in a row. Here's 15 in a row, here's 10 in a row. It'd just be nice to have some aesthetic looking, or whether the houses are in the corner or whether they're straight in a row. It's kind of aesthetics, and we used to get. I go in older developments, and we got that, and they were a lot of Carroll County builders. I'm not saying other builders don't do it, but I don't see that attention to detail that's little, that just makes it more aesthetically pleasing, or to have a little bend so not everybody's looking right in the window next to their next door neighbor, and just sometimes bending a road makes that happen. again, they're little things that people live with once they move in those homes for a long, long time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now, if this were more than 10 acres, they'd have had to have at least an acre and a half of active.
Yes.
So that's already there, and I understand 10 acres is pretty small.
Yeah.
But, and then how does that increase? Like, suppose it was 20 acres, is it 3 acres of active?
It's 10% of the required open space or 1.5 acres, whichever is larger. So if you have, so if you have a much
1.5
larger.
acres doesn't go up with the.
Correct.
If it's 100 acres, it's still an acre and a half.
It-
Or the percentage.
Or the,
Whichever
the
is
percentage
larger.
would probably boost you over
Gotcha.
the acre and a half. Yeah.
So it's a minimum of an acre and a
Yeah.
half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Unless it's,
Unless it
the math
percentage
doesn't.
makes it more.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I do see where we want to require some active open space, but
Yeah.
maybe not 10 acres and less.
Yeah.
And what's the 15%? The 10% is on the active. What's the 15% was Earl you talked about?
The 15% is a minimum of open space, general open
Oh, general,
space.
okay, 15.
Of the gross acreage.
That's general, and 10% of that, 15%, 10% of.
50% of that.
No.
Oh,
So it's 15% of the gross acreage has to be in open space, any type of open space. The active open space is 10% of the required open space, and the required open space is derived from how much the developer has reduced their lots on a lot-by-lot basis. So we go through and calculate, that's what that one table is. We look at every individual lot, and every time they went below what their original zoning was, that amount is required in open space. And so that required open space, 10% of that needs to be active, or an acre and a half. That's what Laura and her staff spend day in, day out, figuring out and making sure that developers comply with this and so on. And why when someone calls up and says, hey, I've got this parcel and I want to develop it, what can I develop? It's not an immediate answer.
And some of it,
It's-
like I said, is
yeah.
numbers, and some of
Yes.
it is just vision and having aesthetically pleasing communities. And you
Yeah.
go some places and new communities are beautiful,
Yeah.
aesthetically pleasing. I want us to be beautiful and I don't want to go in and say, oh, well, the code allows it because we have to do this, this, and this. There's got to be a way that we can have that discussion ahead of time, and how do we make pleasing, nice communities? Because and they're around for a long time.
Yeah.
I will just put in a plug for anything that we can codify being codified, because that just makes it much easier for the development review staff in particular, to do their job and not have so many gray areas that are left open to somebody's interpretation, whether that's staff or the planning
Agreed.
commission
Either way.
or what have you.
And I agree with that, and I want to say too, we all don't sit there like you do and know, hey, this would be better. You need to bring it up, because, I mean, I'm looking at this stuff, you're all probably saying, what the heck's she doing? Because you're not into the detail of it. I don't know all the little things we should recommend. I've been starting to compare to other places. I've been talking to developers that have really nice communities, and they say, oh, they make us do it, or they ask us to do it. And I'm like, how do we do that? How do we be like that? And they will do it. They want to leave it, but they're gonna do the minimum that you have to do, unless we either, and I don't wanna be so prescriptive, but it needs to come from you guys to say, hey, you said you wanted X, give us the tools to do that. Again, by the time it gets to the planning commission, it's, those folks are volunteers, they're paid very little bit for the time they put in. We can't expect them, they don't live in the community, which is unfortunate, so they don't know what's happening on the ground, but they want to do it right too. But if they can do it, they're saying, so you guys have to give us some feedback on maybe some suggestions that would make the developer's life easier to know the expectation, your life easier, the interpretations, and with the expectation. And that's why if you put the purpose paragraph, sometimes at least that's why, and go back to the plan that we have in place that guides your thinking on that. Like a variety of housing types. It says that all through this plan, different kinds of houses. We have one development, 130 houses that are all exactly the same floor plan. That's at one. Okay, that's not a variety. Now, did anybody tell me we need a variety? Do we have something in the code that makes you have a variety? No, but yet we say we want a variety.
Right.
It all occurred before this plan was written.
I'm not, you know what I'm saying, how do we give you the tools to have those conversations? This is what we'd like to see, or maybe we need to have the conversations, but how do we get there?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go through the last couple of slides very briefly, just to give some examples of other places where cluster subdivisions have occurred, and particularly how the open space was handled. So this is Beaver Creek Estates. It's zoned, conservation was recorded in 1993. You can see the areas that are outlined in orange, and they cover primarily the stream valley there, which is highlighted in blue. Those open space parcels were conveyed in fee to the county, so that's one model for handling open space.
And Daphne, where is that located?
Beaver Creek.
Beaver Creek is over in,
Finksburg?
Kenny, is
Beaver
is
Creek.
that your district?
Is that Finksburg?
What road's it on? I have no
Beaver Creek.
idea what Beaver Creek is. Very few.
What are the roads?
We never
that-
had a subdivision
that.
named the same
I
as
feel
what
like
was
it's
on
in the
plan.
Finksburg area,
I think
but
it's
I don't
Finksburg.
wanna.
I think it's
Yeah.
Vicksburg, okay.
We can find out for sure for you.
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah.
is Vicksburg.
Let's go with Finksburg.
Yeah.
In that vicinity.
You might be able to get one of those.
Wilson Farms in the Freedom District, Ellersburg area. This was recorded in 2015. That's situated along Bennett Road, zoned R 20,000. In this case, the open space parcels, which are the green areas, were created and deeded to the homeowners association.
And that's the one, is an example, since I look at it every single day when I drive out. Very nice homes, very nicely done. However, it's another example. I personally believe the open space is nice and it's green. You now have to mow it. They have to pay for it. I would have rather, they're all quarter-acre lots on R20, so, and they're big houses, so there's very little space. I would have rather had my half-acre lot and not have the open space, and have my house have a little space around, because on a big house, a quarter acre is not very much. I know in Montgomery County, they do it because of that land, but the land is there, and if it was laid out differently, it would have been nice to have the larger lots, and if it was open space, then forest it, so nobody has to maintain it. You know, so, but now there's a cost to them, and I've never seen anybody on it, because it's not like flat ball fields. Again, they put sidewalks in, which I really appreciate, on the road, so you can get up and down the road there, even though they don't go anywhere yet. But it's just an example. It's a very nice community. There's not the flag lots. There's the road comes down, so you don't have all these flag lots coming off of it, which I think is not really environmentally the best way to go, or maintenance-wise. But I think if it had been laid out more conventionally, the people would have had their full half acre's not a lot of land. We're not talking about like 3-acre lots. We're talking about a quarter to a half with a big houses that are of substantial size that take up that space. So, again, that's just me. They're purchased, people like them, that's fine. I think if they had a choice, it probably would have been to have the little bit bigger lot. But that's me.
So again, the developer was not forced to
I
cluster.
understand that.
And so that model was certainly available to them, and they chose to go with this model. You did raise an interesting point that I have a question now, and I don't know if Laura is gonna, or Daphne are gonna know, but we'll look into it. And that is, so as part of the subdivision process with clustering, you're required to have that open space, the active open space component, right? Which they've got a couple of parcels that, if I remember right, the two that are closest to Bennett Road are relatively flat and could be used for active. However, once they have built it and it's 5 years later, if the HOA votes and says, we don't want that active space and we want to plant trees everywhere so we don't have to maintain it anymore, can they do that? I don't see why they couldn't. I mean, we are out of it. I guess in theory, and I'm just reasoning out loud, someone could, if it wasn't unanimous by the HOA, someone.
Would it be a zoning violation?
Yeah, could it be a zoning violation that it wasn't maintained as active? But if you had all the property owners and the HOA all sign something and agree that,
I don't think you can agree outside of our ordinance. I think
yeah.
it'd be a
But
zoning
I don't know that
violation.
I don't know that it would be,
No?
though. It's not in our zoning
It's not a zoning code,
It's
yeah.
a
Oh, it's in your site
subdivision.
development code.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, that's right.
you go through that process and it kind of
I don't know.
ends.
I don't know.
it's an interesting question.
But you basically have a homeowner fee for this. I mean, maybe there's value to it for all the houses. Again,
Yeah.
I think, and I'd rather say, hey, reforest the trees, put them into people's yards. You know, we make them reforest stuff. Hey, put them back into the land that it came from and put some trees on it. But, you know, it's all, it's just, what's the benefit? Is there
Yeah.
a benefit or not? And if you ask 100 people, would they rather have this or that? What would they say? I believe they'd rather have the half-acre lot. That's me, for a house this size, unless they have true amenities with it.
But, okay, how do we codify that? If we wanna keep clustering, I'm trying to get to, to some decision points here. Sounds like Commissioner Guerin said, sorry to pick on you, that it sounds like nobody wants to eliminate clustering. No one wants to eliminate
okay,
clustering,
yeah.
yeah. So you wanna give them the option, so we gave the developer the option. This was back when we had to do the conventional plan and the active, but I don't know if it's active in the sense of
It's not flat.
anything, intentionally active. It's not like there's a playground or anything. How do we codify what you're saying, which is people would rather the half acre than the quarter acre, when you still allow clustering?
Well, I think part of it is
That's what I'm trying to-
we've allowed it to go down to half the size of the lot. If it was a certain percentage and you allowed, small area for open space, but it's basically taken a half-acre lot to a quarter, it's taking a quarter-acre lot to like a tenth, and it's taking a full acre to a half. So we literally, it's not truthful. Why don't we just zone it all that? Not, I'm saying,
Yeah.
but we say the land use is X, and it says it right in all of these things. It doesn't say may do that, it says, here's the land use, it's 40,000. And then we say, but you can do all these things, and everyone is doing it. There's nothing conventional.
Basically, that would eliminate clustering, and you just rezone all the property to.
Well, I'm not asking to do that, just because
No,
what we said we were gonna do, everything in here says, existing communities, it should fit in with existing communities. I would say the existing communities are 40 and 50 years old, they were done, and they have these lots. So that is what fits in, unless it's a benefit to that community, these things really are just being downzoned to another whole zoning, and the rest is being just left open, and it doesn't necessarily fit in with the existing communities that were done conventionally a long time ago.
Yeah, so I guess that's the struggle, right, is that the plan says fit in with existing community. That's not codifiable. That's one person's opinion versus another and so on. And so the actual implementation needs to be put in
I
code.
agree with you. There's no-
And so the code allows for these things. Now, if we want to change what the code allows, we can certainly do that. But the general language in the master plan, we've met. The fitting in with existing communities, we're fitting in with the existing communities in the general opinion of the Board of County Commissioners and Planning Commission as the codes were developed to mirror the master plan. Now, one thing that you mentioned was the lot sizes. So it wasn't until 2022 that we actually set the bottom threshold as to how far down that those you could decrease lot sizes. Prior to that, there was not a limit. So
these could have been.
these could have been,
10,000.
yes, they could have been even smaller, but the developer chose this development style, chose these lot styles, and had that flexibility because they went with clustering. It was only until recently that we said, if you're zoned R20, you can't go below R10, or the equivalent of R10.
And I'm not
10,000.
gonna ask you to go back and do this, but I think if you'd go back 20 years when this all started, and you'd say, how many people did this then, and how many people do it now? It's almost every project. So every project, when you say, oh, this is R20, it's not R20, it's R10. So I don't think that's necessary, because it's allowed for it. Before, and I don't know what changed, before, it wasn't done like that. It was available, it was more of a rarity that they would do it. I can think of a couple communities that did it nicely, but it was something that was the exception, not the norm. It's become the norm, and I don't know if it's because they can or whatever in these districts, but again, it's not truth in lending when you,
Yeah.
when
My
every
gut-
project is going down to half the size.
Yeah, my gut feel is that it's the availability of land, is what's available to be developed now. That as the easy lots and the larger lots were developed, and now, and maybe that's why we're seeing a lot more that are less than 10 acres, and the zoning commission can has that variance on the percentages, is that's just what's still available. I mean, we're talking a lot here about the Freedom area, but as far as like, I mean, if we make changes to the code, how many lots, parcels are going to be impacted by the changes that we make?
But what
I'm
I
not
just-
saying that we shouldn't make them. I'm just saying, but the reality is, there are not a lot of developable parcels left in the Freedom area that any changes that we make would impact.
Okay, and I'm just saying, on this particular one, and it's just because it's up there, I think this is one of the nicer ones, but if that had just been left R20, we would have had the same number of houses, probably the same court, we would have had it spread out a little bit differently, and it would have been people on true R20,000 with no homeowner fees. That's what I'm saying, so we gotta write, what's the purpose? What was the purpose of why we're doing this? And it's been stretched to what the purpose is. I think that it would have been, again, I'm not picking on them because it's a nice community, but I think it would have been a lot easier to done it conventional, the lots that were proposed, and it would have been not the strain.
So if the board wants the planning commission, wants to give staff direction to go back to the planning commission, what I think needs to be thought about is what is that direction gonna be? What do you want
And I'd like to
to
say.
see to come back to you as recommendations?
And I'd like to say something
Yeah.
about all this. A, we don't want to do anything that penalizes the 20 acres, the farm, the true farmers, the true people that have lived here forever. This, even if it went to R10, and we don't see too many that are taking it strictly to 10,000 square feet, that's a quarter acre. That's a decent sized lot on water and sewer. And my question would be, I think you made a good point. I used to argue that in Columbia, all the pretty properties are gone. Everything, it costs double to grade it, it costs double because the pretty ones are gone. But secondly, how many of these sit empty because nobody wants them? You know, it's a developer isn't going to develop something that won't sell. And as long as people want to buy it, and not everybody can afford $1 million house. And I think we don't want to punish those people either. You know, I understand, you know, where you're coming from and on some of this stuff. And again, I also struggle on any rule, I don't care if it's development or whatever, if you look at the 4 horrible things, I'm not sure you can make a rule to stop them from happening and not inhibit the 20 good ones, you know. So I think, and I don't know, Roberta, you're asking, that's not very solid objective.
Well, actually,
But-
if I
but-
might.
But that's what I think they ought to look at, is I think we want clustering, we get, and I don't want to get into PUDs and other things we ought to be doing too, but the clustering's one thing that seems to be good for people. It gets us open space. Maybe we want to better control what the open space is, but,
Yeah, more directive there.
yeah, I personally don't think, we don't want to dictate stormwater management or do what's best or worse. My gosh, where Men's Warehouse is, there's underground stormwater management. That's city or that's us? It's all corrugated metal
Warehouse here?
pipes.
Yeah.
It's,
In
I
Westminster,
I would not want to walk down
that's
through
the
it.
city.
Somebody's going to be digging it up and replacing it soon.
You
But-
mean the one here in the city?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the city.
yeah, so, you know, it's tough. The only time I've done underground is Baltimore City primarily, where you wanted a turf field between a school and another school and you had no room.
Yeah.
And so you bit, Cal Ripken bit the bullet and paid for it. But, you know, it's tough. I don't know. We don't want to make rules that hurt people, but we want to make rules that help.
And I wish you'd used Oak Creek as an example. It's the one with all the white fences.
Yeah.
It's the one that they used the whole back to be in the stream bed, and all the houses are right against the road with, and they all put up their own white fences, and they're all, those lots are very small. This lot is probably, you know, an 8 out of 10. Theirs is like, the way it's been done.
Yeah.
And that's the example I'm talking about of them being pushed all up against the road, and everybody put up their different fences, and then they were supposed to leave an easement to put in trees, and the county didn't catch them putting up the fences, so they didn't put all the trees up, because they put the fences in the easement, which they shouldn't have, but it shouldn't have been close to the
Yeah.
road. And because they didn't have, they couldn't use the stream bed, so that was an example of, to me, when I started
Yes.
seeing that it was not being done in a good way. I'll go back to net versus gross. That's something I'd like to see, just because I think it is the norm of doing it. And at least it would make me feel more comfortable that we're taking out and starting with a number that's, you know, that's a, it seems to be, I mean, I just pulled this up and it just said net versus gross. And in Carroll County, I think, we're not Montgomery County. If I'm Montgomery County, I might want to use gross and do as much as I can, but we're a beautiful county, and I would like to, I want my area to stay nice too. I don't mind development. I know some people don't want, we're gonna develop. We're the only place right now in the county that is developed. 95% of new homes have been built in the Freedom District and not in the municipalities, 5% in the municipalities. So we are growing, we have no choice, but we need to make sure that it's done nicely.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
the net, so we go with the net.
And you guys,
What is-
you only have one more slide. I don't know how passionate you are about it,
Yeah.
but I'd like to hear from the three that haven't said
In-
much,
in-
if
Yeah.
you guys have some.
If I may
Thoughts
just
on
answer
this?
one quick
Yeah,
question,
yeah.
though, about Oak Creek. Oak Creek was done so long ago that we were not able to find the plans to bring today.
But you sent me a picture, you sent me an aerial of it. You can
An
sort of
aerial,
see-
but those aren't the development plans.
No, but what I'm saying
Yeah.
is, it sort of showed how it was all pushed forward on
Right.
a little lot so that the whole stream bed could be, so the aerial was a visual that was good.
Yes, yeah.
That's all right. I appreciate you going into depth on it, but
Yeah.
picture's worth 1,000 words.
Well, Commissioner Vigliotti, you wanted to speak a couple minutes ago. Let's start
Yeah.
with you if you don't mind.
No, sure, not at all. Real quick, where is Rustic Rising located? Get through this last final slide.
Sure,
and I'm
yeah.
happy to-
Put a bow on it.
There's that.
That's Oklahoma Road on the far left, running north-south.
the one with
so
the hills.
It's
Oh,
Yes.
that's one of
the
the
one
hills.
with the hills? The one
That's
with
the
Yeah.
one with the steep slope.
Yes.
These backyards
Yes.
on these three houses that you see
Never heard the name of it.
Yeah, so.
are sleep.
Yeah, so Commissioner Krebs, when we went on our tour and you pointed out the steep slopes that you said were maintained as open space, those are not open space.
So where's
Those-
the open space in that community?
It's the green highlighted and the steep slopes. Oops.
Sorry, I'm trying to get the pointer to work.
So the steep slopes
You guys
are,
need a better mouse.
the steep slopes are on the properties that are just north of the, no, go left or along
The
Oklahoma.
steep slopes are the
Oh,
common.
these ones right
Yeah,
here,
yeah,
yeah.
those are steep slopes, those are all individually owned by those properties. The green area, which is the open space for the development, that's relatively flat.
So this was originally zoned for 20,000, but it looks like what the developer did here is you've got some lots that are closer to 10,000, but then it looks like you've got some that are probably approaching 30,000.
Yeah.
So they took a lot of flexibility with, am I reading that right?
Yes, but
split
it's also
zoned, yeah.
split zoned. So the portion of the property that was conservation, they were larger lots because of the
Oh,
split zone.
okay, I
Yeah.
didn't see
The
the
ones
color.
near the
There's-
river.
Okay, the
Yeah.
color, there's, okay, so that would be, like, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense then.
Yeah.
That's
And in
why it
the
looks
case
that
of
way.
this development, the developer, one of the ways that they met the active open space requirement, correct me if I'm wrong, is they proposed a walking trail. That's the yellow that's shown on there. That is in a mix of both on the open space parcels and as well easements on some of the private property.
And you said it's a split zone of what, R20 and?
R20 and conservation.
Oh, I see, I'm sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, so most of my questions have been answered. I have a couple more that I'll email simply for the sake of time, but the two that I would like to ask right now, when it comes to determining specific requirements for lot sizes, that kind of thing, are we wholly dependent upon ourselves, or do we also have to take into account state law? I mean, I know with certain with site plans, for example, we have to take into things like water management, for example. But so for something like clustering, I mean, are we mostly dependent on ourselves and our own determinations, or do we have to take into account certain state determinations?
I think the only limitation in that regard, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be if you were doing something in the ag zone where you had your ceiling of 7 lots. In that case, your calculated yield based on our zoning code might be more, but because we have the septic tiers limitation, you'd the max would be 7 regardless of what your calculated yield is.
Yeah, so fundamentally, the state land use article delegates zoning and land use authority to the county until we get preempted, all right? And
Right, that's exactly
Yes.
why I was asking.
yeah, and so from a zoning perspective and so on, we have not been preempted yet. We all saw the conceptual language that we responded to that would preempt us on those sorts of requirements.
Right, okay.
Yeah, it could be.
So you said on the large lots of a farm, you said you can do up to 7, and they can be clustered down to,
So in the ag district, it's a little
Okay.
different. So we do not have any code related to clustering in the ag district. There was back in '65, but over the years, the concept of clustering became the de facto development methodology in the ag district. And so lots are encouraged to be 1 acre and clustered and so on, but the word cluster is not used. So,
what's the minimum lot size in ag?
1 acre.
1 acre.
It's 1 acre. yeah.
Yes, yeah. But when the state adopted septic tiers, and we can do a whole presentation again on septic tiers if you would like, the county never adopted them. And so because of that, in our non-public sewer areas and areas that we do not anticipate public sewer, anywhere else in the county, so basically outside of our growth areas, we are limited to development of 7 lots or less.
And that's whether you have 100 acres or 500 acres.
Correct.
7 lots.
Yes,
And so that also includes conservation zoned
Yes.
land. So you might have, and of course, that yield is much greater because it's based on 1 lot for every 3 acres as opposed to 1 per 20-ish.
And they're all on septic and well.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
yes.
It's a rare
So-
exception where conservation like this,
Yeah.
being on public water and sewer.
So even the
Yeah.
1 acre ones are all on water, or on well and septic.
Yes,
So
Out in the ag district.
yeah.
the only, I have a couple quick comments, but before the comments, I'll ask my other question. Again, I'll email the others because they may take a little bit of time, but, so the other question is for and maybe I already know the answer to this, but, so in an area like this where, actually, you go back to, yeah, thank you. So in an area like Wilson Farms, for example, where you have a specific amount of land that has not been developed, right? One of the concerns that I guess I have about clustering, I'm not opposed to it, but one of the concerns that I do have is that if some future board of commissioners decides that the undeveloped land can be developed, right? Is that within the realm of possibility, or perhaps even that the state comes in to preempt and say any developed,
Privately owned.
Yeah, but,
Yeah.
but
Well,
It's
but if-
privately owned by the
Well,
homeowners association.
well, right, but if the state comes in and says that an undeveloped parcel or undeveloped section of this property can be developed, could not the members of that community decide, okay, well, we're gonna go ahead and develop it? I mean, that is a possibility, right? So you
it's just like
increase.
ADUs, yeah. that's a good
Right, so you
question.
increase the clustering that the clustering was initially intended to attempt to prevent.
Yes, so anything is possible.
But
Don't make any
wouldn't the
suggestions.
homeowners covenants and our county rules probably
Just depends on
make
how
that
much-
Uh,
not happen?
Depends
much
if
the
you get a
state
good lawyer like
preempts.
Roberta.
Oh,
Roberta
okay.
would figure out how to do it.
It just depends on how much the state wants to
Good
preempt
lawyer.
your zoning.
I can't afford a good lawyer.
Yeah. No, it just depends on how much the state
But
would
that's a
want to
very good
present
question.
you.
So the state
Gotcha.
could,
Because they're doing
I mean,
ADUs right now.
And
Well,
and there are lots and lots of places, like where I grew up in Howard County, I go back to, and I see places that were clearly, I thought were fully developed, and now there are 2 houses on the
Infill,
same,
infill.
Right.
on the same, and I think they look like crap personally, but that's, I don't live there. Where I thought this was a whole development for 58 years or more. And now there are 2 houses where when I was growing up and walked past there every day, there was only 1.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is a result of either the zoning being, let's say, half acre, and they used a whole acre to put 1 house on, and then they decided they could put a second house on the other half, or a change in zoning at some point, I have no idea. We have enough trouble running Carroll County, I'm not gonna try to run Howard County. So, either their zoning changed, or it had been that way, they just didn't take advantage of it, 50 years ago. But yeah, that, you know, infill development, there, here, these kinds of things should be harder, because it's, you know, not, it's not, it's privately owned property by a group of people, you know, but
And in
anything's
this
possible,
case-
as Chris says, in the
Right, so,
future.
And in this
so.
case, it's all usable. I mean, the other case we looked at before, the property was unusable, because it was, you couldn't build on, this you could build on.
Well, right, and so my request, going back to Planning Commission to look at, I mean, so, from what I can gather so far, right, I'd like to, you know, we're talking about, or we have been talking about clarity of definitions, open space, usable space, what is enjoyment, what is aesthetic, that kind of thing. For me, the percentage of one kind of space versus another, and that's kind of why I was asking about whether or not
Yeah.
there were state requirements that we were taking into account, 50% versus 15%. If there is a better method for determining those percentage differentials. The lot sizes, the variances that are possible, I'd like to look at the variances that are allowable, because I know, like, we were talking maybe about an hour ago about certain sizes allow certain variances to occur. And then, of course, last but not least, what I just brought up, how do we prevent clustering of clustering, so to speak? You know, is there a method that we can employ to prevent that from happening? Again, I'm not quite sure off the top of my head, but again, to try to stack another 6 or 7 houses in each of those
Well,
undeveloped.
We've done
Right.
it to some extent, in terms of residential at least, with like ag remainders. You can develop your ag land up to a point, and then there's an ag remainder, and now you can put other uses on it. We won't go down, that's a whole rabbit hole, we should go down for another 3 hours, but you couldn't, you're not allowed to put more residential on it. So, there's probably something we could do with that.
Right, is there something, or could we borrow something? So,
Yeah, borrow
and that's it from me. So I want to make sure
So-
that Commissioner Gordon, yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm sorry, if
No.
I can just address one of your questions.
Oh, sure,
Sort
please.
of how we currently have things. So one of the code requirements of the cluster subdivision is that you have to show all of your yield for that parcel as part of your cluster subdivision. So you have essentially extinguished all of your yield based on our current laws related to subdivision. So it would, now, anything could happen. The board could change the laws of subdivision and then create opportunities. That's one of the dangers of creating a new law that does this, because countywide, you could create this ability for any of these parcels to further subdivide. But based on current law right now, and per the clustering, all of the yield that's available for that original parcel has been extinguished. So there's those, based on current law, those current parcels could not be developed or further subdivided or anything like that. Anything can be changed.
Like my ag remainder.
Mineral Hill isn't fully approved yet, or is it?
It's under construction.
So they could have had 20 lots.
Yes.
They chose to do 14.
Yes,
They're now locked into the 14.
Correct.
It's approved, it's
Yes.
done, they can't add another lot.
correct.
During
So-
the process, they could have.
Yes.
So as long as no laws change,
Yeah,
Yes.
let's say that as the basis. 20 years from now, the Mineral Hill person comes back, or these guys come back, and they say, I want to put a house on that nice, pretty green
Yeah.
spot. We would say, no, because you've used all your lot.
Gotcha.
As long as
Alright.
no other
Yeah.
things change.
Unless you
I
do
just
the
wish-
ADUs from the state. I mean, accessory
Well,
dwelling
that's
units is sort of a little step, it's an acceptable step in certain situations, but it's a step,
It's a door.
It's
that
a door.
opens.
It's a door that's
Sure.
open, yeah.
Yeah. And it's a very complicated door.
Yes.
Commissioner Gordon.
Well, I think we've all had a lot of interesting conversation today. The obvious is, yes, we have limited land use, whether it be for ag pres or this, and I'm not getting into ag pres today by any means. But I think, I think all 5 of us are very cognizant of the needs of the county as a whole. I understand, different areas such as the Freedom District have other scenarios that may not be throughout the county, but, we've got to be really careful, because we've got to be able to have housing for everybody. That's the one thing I keep hearing, whether it's at a community college meeting, whether it's at a chamber breakfast, doesn't matter who it is. We've got to make sure that we've got acceptable housing and it's balanced for everybody. One thing, I was trying to find it and I can't find it. I don't remember if it was 2024, was it 2025? Commissioner Vigliotti might remember part of this, we had looked at the number of housing permits at one point that were pulled per district, and I know it was quite
Yes.
shocking to our former colleague because he thought the majority were in his district, but they were actually in Tawneytown,
Yes.
District 1, and then I think it was either Hampstead and then District 3, if memory serves.
I
But,
just sent the board.
Okay.
Commissioner Krebs asked for that information, and I sent it two different ways. The first way I sent it a couple days ago was, since 2020, just raw numbers, how many houses have been, residences of any type, any
Sure.
size, apartments to mini mansions, whatever, have been built in the county, including the towns, and there are about 12,000
And,
roughly.
and
then-
Westminster and the Westminster area around it might almost be the most. They had a lot.
Yeah.
I
they-
was surprised.
It's
They're
up-
about
it's up there.
2,400. The, and then Commissioner Krebs asked for a breakdown of by district-ish. And so each town is identified, and that's, again, over 25 years since 2020, about 12,000.
So that's over 25 years.
Yeah.
And don't, keep in
Good
mind,
point.
the yield is the same, we're not getting any more units
Oh,
out
no.
of this. The yield will be the same, it's just how the development occurs. In this particular, now, it's different on the senior housing, but this yield is the same, you're still getting 20 or whatever, in most cases, you're getting the same amount of houses. It's just how they're configured.
Yeah.
In the zoning in which we've advertised, that's my issue, it's what we've advertised, and said, they have different types of houses.
well, I think it's a good initial conversation. I think there's going to
Yeah.
be more out of this, but that's all for me today.
Commissioner Guerin?
Yeah, I've got some thoughts. I think some adjustments might be in order, but we'll go back and everybody have an opportunity to think it over. One last question, and I guess I get to close this out because I know we got to get going. We got a busy afternoon. You mentioned earlier that stormwater management, under certain situations, certain circumstances, gets turned over to the county.
Yes.
Does that count towards our NPDES credits when that happens?
No, so the NPDS program is addressing impervious area that was constructed prior to stormwater management regulations. So you've got old impervious and you've got new impervious. So the state maintains kind of the status quo with new development for stormwater management regulations. So you're not making things worse when you build something new. But as far as our NPDS program, that's looking at all of our old development that predated stormwater management requirements. And the state trying to make up and improve water quality by taking all of this old impervious area, whether it's the city of Westminster is a good example. Most of the city of Westminster way predates stormwater management. So building water quality treatment for that existing impervious to improve water quality.
And that very broad interpretation they use on that as well. So, okay, that's
Yeah.
it for me. Yeah, thank you.
And
Yes.
So, to finish us up, hopefully, can you or the combination tell us the process? And I guess what you just said, Commissioner Guerin, we'd still like to email some thoughts, probably. We want to think about it, but I know you guys have little to do, so you're anxious for us to cut you loose. But what's the timing and what's the process?
Can I make a suggestion? Okay, so I think several of us are taking notes, and we have the video, which is always
Yep,
helpful
yep.
to go back to. So I think we want to capture the points that were made. I have several, and then some have been additionally mentioned here at the wrap-up. Capture them all for you and say, these appear to be the things that the county commissioners are interested in addressing in the clustering. And then you can review them, and maybe we can send it to you by early next week. You can review them and then add if anything, and then we can have maybe, if we put this on the agenda for Thursday, then for direction to go to the planning commission, would that be okay? I mean, do you
Well,
think, if we
what's-
get you the.
What's the timing of that? So
So-
we do all that, then it goes to the planning commission.
Right, you give the board.
And with staff input,
You give the board direction on, okay, let's say we come up with a list of 10 things you mentioned today that you're interested in possibly. We come to you next Thursday and say, this is the list of 10, do you want to do all 10? You say, no, just these 5. Okay, fine. Then you give direction to go to the planning commission. Staff then works with the planning commission on those 5 points back and forth in various planning commission meetings over the next few months, depending on how complicated something is. And then it comes back to you, that's what's happening today with the APFOs this afternoon, with a recommendation from the planning commission.
Does it require a public meeting?
The planning commission meetings are all public. When it comes back to you you review the recommendation, you at that point can have more conversations, or you can say, go to public hearing.
So it
Public
does
hearing,
require a hearing and we have to
It's a
do
zoning code
that.
change. Public hearings happen, and then you approve it.
I mean,
So,
it's good, by the time we do it, I mean, this is not as important as the over 55 stuff. It's similar because they're even clustering more than this, and there's no amenities, but, there's nothing left, there's very little left to be built. There's, every large parcel is under review now. The fact that it takes months again, I complained because it was not the intention of any plan, this plan, the plan before, how it's been interpreted. I don't know how to change it, but by the time you go through this long process of making it more specific to match the plan, it's gonna be, your work's not gonna be really worth it, but, I think we should go through, we should do it. Again, I've said since the beginning of time, let's put on the record one more time, the definitions were put in place 5 years after the master plan was adopted. It did not reflect the master plan, and this is not the worst example of it, the over 55 is. But it did not reflect this, it was not considered, it does not follow, the definitions of open space in here. No one ever talks about the master plan. When I sat on the housing work group, they never would mention this word. They never mentioned the word freedom community plan, like it doesn't exist. It does exist. Board of Commissioners adopted it, we've had it in place since 1977, it's been changed, a lot of time goes into it, and to put a plan forward and not follow it, and not listen to it, and not see what it says, it's to me, it's like, why are we doing this? Because that's what we tell people, when people move in, and I know people have been in certain areas for generations, well, people might have been in there for generations too. And I've lived there for almost 40 years, I think, I'm entitled to be able to know what's gonna go, this is not the breaking thing, but it's just not truth in sentence, truth in whatever, land use, when you can bring something down to half its size and not have what I think most people would call a benefit, and that's what we're trying to get to. What's the purpose? Maybe look at the Frederick County rules, look at some other counties. If we're gonna allow it, let's make it be what it was envisioned, or get rid of it, because it's not what was sold. I don't think it was. If you read the master plan again, I've read it like 4 times, and I want to make sure I'm not missing something, and I don't think that I am. And that's what the community has asked for. That's what we agreed as a board, past boards, to do. And I'm just saying, let's follow that, so their expectations are met. And it's not just for this issue. This is for a couple of other issues as well we have not yet talked about.
And we do need to make sure we get the county gets something out of it. And Ligonar Creek Elementary is being built right now in Frederick on land we gave them 23 years ago.
Yeah,
So,
it takes a long time
so
sometimes.
it does get you some school sites, some park sites, some recreation areas, but we might have to make them.
So do we need a motion, because this is a work session, to go into recess until 1 o'clock, or we're
Oh.
good until?
No, we're not.
What?
We're not in open session, so
Yeah.
we're not,
You-
it's a work session, it's over.
All right, I just wanted to make sure, that's
Yeah,
all.
just end this and then start again.
Yeah.
All right, so motion to adjourn.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. And-
Thank you.
And we'll be
Thank you,
back
guys.
here at